The rain fell with a slow, sullen insistence, as if the gods themselves meant to keep the city half-washed, half-drowned. King's Landing was never silent. But on a night like this, the restless voices of the streets grew muted, as if muffled beneath a sodden woolen cloak. Candlelight danced behind the high windows of the Red Keep, uncertain and flickering, shadows crawling across the gilded walls and the floors of polished stone. In the hidden passageways behind the small council chamber, Varys moved as a ghost, slippered feet gliding noiselessly across the flagstones. The perfume of his skin was sweet and cloying, carefully chosen, masking the earthy tang of the tunnels and the sweat of his own unease. He paused before a concealed peephole, watching the council assemble in the echoing gloom beyond. Only a few years ago, his presence had been a source of nervous laughter or thinly veiled contempt. But now, with so many dead or fled, his silence was an instrument as keen as any sword. He waited as Grand Maester Pycelle shuffled into his seat, beard trembling. Sir Kevan Lannister followed, shoulders drawn in weariness. A man grown old not just by the years, but by the endless burdens of kin and crown. Cersei, regal and poisonous in green velvet, watched him like a hawk. Mace Tyrell blustered in behind her, his cheer forced and brittle as spun glass. Varys noted them all, cataloging every sigh, every glance. It was almost time. Years of secrets, layered and coiled like the innards of a serpent, were coming to the surface. A single push now, and the world would slide off its moorings. But not yet. He slipped away, the whispering silk of his robes barely stirring the musty air, and vanished deeper into the warren beneath the keep. He had another meeting tonight, and the hour was drawing near. The secret room had been prepared for him by one of his little birds, an urchin with sharp teeth and quicker fingers, whom Varys rewarded with honeyed cakes and a silver coin for every message delivered. There, candlelight glowed against stone, and the only furniture was a table and 2 plain stools. He waited. In the darkness, he rehearsed the words he would use, weighing each one, balancing honesty against utility. Secrets, in Varys' world, were never simple truth or simple lie. They were currency, more precious than gold. A door opened, a hidden panel so flush with the wall that even the most careful eye would miss it, and Pettier Baelish slipped in, his mocking smile flickering like a candle in a draught. "You summoned me, Lord Varys. I had hoped for warmer quarters, but I suppose you have a fondness for damp stone." Littlefinger's eyes glittered, assessing, amused. Varys folded his hands across his stomach. "Warmth, my lord, is for those who fear the cold. We, I think, have grown accustomed to shadows." "Speak for yourself," Pettier said. "I would rather bathe in sunlight. If the truth is as naked as you say, why not let it shine?" Varys smiled faintly. "Truth has a habit of blistering the skin." "Ah." Littlefinger sat, arranging his cloak with exaggerated delicacy. "I take it, you have some new outrage to share. Or are we simply trading rumors tonight?" "Nender soir." Varys reached into his sleeve and produced a sheaf of parchment. Its seals broken, the ink still fresh and glistening in places. "The realm is awash with bastards, Pettier. But blood is a current that runs deeper than men know. You play at the edges. Marriages, inheritances, debts. I have something older, truer. I have parentage." Pettier's expression did not change, but his eyes sharpened, and his fingers curled on the table's edge. "Do you mean to start a fire, or simply let me warm my hands?" Varys let the first page fall. The names written upon it were familiar. Jon Snow, Gendry Waters, Edric Storm, Milestone, the Sands of Dorne, the Rivers of the Vale. But beside each, in Varys' fine hand, was another name. A true parent. A secret kept, and in some cases forgotten even by the players themselves. Every man in this room, every man in this city, believes he knows who he is. That is the lie at the heart of every house, every marriage. But what if the truth were told, all at once, for all to see? Littlefinger stared at the parchment, the flicker of candlelight drawing shadows across his face. "You would tear down the realm," he murmured, half in awe, half in warning. "A careful touch, Varys. Secrets do not unmake themselves. Careful. Varys' tone was soft, but there was steel beneath it. The realm tears itself apart, Petter. I simply let the threads unravel. He folded the parchment again, sliding it across the table. Think of what this could mean. Jon Snow, the North's bastard, beloved by his kin. But what if he is not Ned Stark's son at all? What if he's the heir of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, hidden at Winterfell? Or Gendry, the blacksmith's boy, rightful son of King Robert? What if he bears more claim to the throne than Tommen Baratheon? What would Dorne do if they learned that one of their own is not truly a bastard, but a prince? Then he were. Littlefinger's smile widened, white and sharp as a crescent moon. You would have us believe you have proof. I have the truth, Varys said. And that is more than proof. The realm has lived with half-truths for too long. He leaned forward, the sleeves of his robe slipping down to reveal the pale, hairless flesh of his wrists. But why now, you wonder? Because the game is broken, Petyr. Because war is coming. Because all these kings and queens, Cersei, Stannis, Daenerys across the sea, they are playing at thrones, while the true players are hidden in shadows. Manda. Petyr regarded him in silence, the smile fading by slow degrees. And you would unmask them all, at once. Why? For whose benefit? For the realm, Varys replied, almost tenderly. For peace, perhaps, or for chaos. The realm is sick, Petyr. Sometimes, a sickness must be drawn to the surface, lanced and let to bleed. The wounds will hurt, but perhaps they will heal, if given the truth. Namnisever. Littlefinger considered. The silence stretched, filled only by the faint drip of water from the stones. At last he stood, gathering his cloak around him. You play a dangerous game, Spider. Perhaps too dangerous even for you. Varys bowed his head, hands folded. That is always the way with truth. Petyr left as quietly as he had entered, footsteps vanishing into the dark. Varys remained, alone with the flickering candle and the silence of the stones. Across the city, in the smoky depths of a tavern on the Street of Silk, Gendry Waters hammered at a dented breastplate, sweat pouring from his brow. The clamor of the forge was a kind of solace. Here, the only parentage that mattered was the strength of his arms and the surety of his hand. He paused, lifting the breastplate into the light, testing the curve and the shine. The fire made the steel glow, and for a moment he fancied he saw his own face in it, distorted and long. Boy. Tabomot loomed out of the darkness, his voice gruff. You dreaming or working? Working, Gendry muttered, setting his jaw. Dream on your own time. The armorer scowled, but there was something almost fond in his gaze. We have a client for this, and he wants it done right. Gendry nodded, set the steel down, and wiped his brow. There was talk in the city these days. Talk of bastards and blood, of secrets coming to light. He'd heard his own name whispered more than once, though he never listened long. What did he care for high-born names? He had his mother's face, nothing of the father she never spoke of. His life was steel and sweat, and the clang of hammers. Whatever secrets the lords and ladies traded, they had nothing to do with him. Or so he thought. On the windy heights of the Eyrie, Maya Stone hurried along the mountain path. A basket of bread and cheese balanced on her hip. The air here was cold and sharp, biting at her cheeks. She liked it that way. The air was cleaner than the whispers that drifted up from the vale below. She stopped at the bridge, staring down at the clouds swirling beneath her. They looked soft as fleece, but she knew the drop was death. She had never minded the height. It was the only place she felt truly apart, above it all. They called her bastard, but never to her face. She was too strong for that, too wild. She wondered, sometimes, if her father had ever looked up at these mountains and thought of her. But then she would remember her mother's laughter, the way it sounded in the little cottage in the woods, and she would shake the thought away. Let the lords play at secrets. She had work to do. In the Red Keep, Jon Snow's name was spoken in 100 corners, carried on whispers from kitchen maids and gold cloaks, through council chambers and guard posts. Varys' little birds sang, their songs strange and haunting. Some said Jon was Eddard Stark's son, born of a maid in the north. Others spoke of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, a tale grown wild in the telling. The truth, Varys knew, was sharper than any story. He watched as the rumors spread, planting seeds in the minds of those who mattered. He watched as ravens were read in Winterfell, as letters arrived in the Stormlands, as Dorne woke to a new unease. Cersei Lannister was first to rage. She read the letter with shaking hands, the words burning her eyes. "Lies," she spat. "All of it, lies from a eunuch's mouth." But Pycelle, white-faced and trembling, only muttered, "He has the birth records. The seals, the letters from Tower of Joy. There is truth here, your grace, more than I would wish." Tommen, sweet and lost, blinked at her in confusion. "Am I a bastard, mother?" Cersei struck him hard, and he fell silent. In the Tower of the Hand, Kevan Lannister met with his nephew Jaime, voice low and urgent. "The city stirs, and not with Lannister gold this time. If this spreads, if the truth is believed, your sister is undone. The boy Tommen may lose all." Jaime's eyes were tired. "Let it come, uncle. If Tommen is not Robert's son, the truth will not wait forever. Nor should it." Elsewhere, in the gloom of a candlelit study, Samwell Tarly bent over ancient books, translating Old Valyrian, piecing together fragments from Maester Aemon's letters. He read the names and felt the world tilt beneath him. "Jon Snow," he murmured. "You never told me, you never knew." The shockwave rippled outward, carried by ravens and rumor, by the footsteps of various little birds and the mouths of innkeepers and septons. It touched the Stormlands, where Edric Storm rode with a new sense of purpose. It touched the Riverlands, where a certain lord's bastard began to wonder what power truly meant. It reached Dorne, where the sand snakes gathered, eyes bright and dangerous. Obara wanted blood. Nymeria wanted intrigue. Tyne wanted vengeance. And what if one of us is not a bastard at all? Nymeria mused, toying with a dagger. What if one of us is a princess trueborn? Obara spat. Bastard or princess, it changes nothing. Men die either way. Varys, in his hidden rooms, watched it all unfold. He sent more letters, each carefully crafted, each word chosen to strike at a different place. A lord's pride, a lady's grief, a bastard's secret hope. He did not rush. The game was in motion, and it would take time for the pieces to fall. He thought, sometimes, of a time before secrets. When he had been a child, before the sorcerer, and the knife, and the burning brazier. He wondered if truth had mattered then. He doubted it. But he knew, with a clarity sharper than any blade, that the world would not be the same when the last secret was told. The realm would bleed, and perhaps one day, it would heal. North of the wall, the cold wind howled, and Jon Snow stood atop the wall, cloak snapping at his heels. Ghosts pressed close beside him, red eyes unblinking. A raven arrived, black wings beating against the white. Jon took the letter from the leather tube, fingers clumsy with cold. He read the words once, then again. "My lord," Dolorous Ed said, peering up at him. "Bad news." Jon folded the letter, tucking it inside his cloak. "No, only the truth." He looked out across the endless white, the weight of his name heavy on his shoulders. The story would not end quickly or cleanly. In King's Landing, in Winterfell, in Dorne, and the Eyrie and the Stormlands, every bastard would be forced to reckon with the truth of their blood, and every great house would tremble as the world shifted beneath them. Varys watched, silent and serene, as the first stones fell. He waited for the avalanche to begin. Kai. The city grew restless as rumors bred with each passing hour. Torchlight flickered against misted walls and rain-slick cobblestones, and from the halls of the Red Keep to the lowest cellars of Flea Bottom, eyes grew wary and voices dropped to hushed, hungry whispers. In brothels and bathhouses, along the rookeries and shadowed corridors, the tales of new parentage, of secret heirs and threatened lines, were traded like precious spice. The spider's web vibrated with the tension of 1,000 secrets stretching taut, ready to snap. In his high chamber, Tyrion Lannister studied the shifting movements in the court. He sat at his desk, watching Varys' missive burn in a silver dish, the smoke curling up to the carved ceiling beams. A goblet of arbor gold was untouched at his elbow, the day's reports laid out in neat orderly piles. But all the numbers and council minutes meant little, for the old order was trembling at the edges, and he felt it as surely as the bones in his feet felt the rumble of oncoming thunder. Podrick, silent as always, waited near the door, his face anxious. Tyrion beckoned him closer, lowering his voice. "How many tonight?" he asked, voice heavy with irony. 3? 5? Have the small folk invented another dozen new bastards since supper? Podrick blinked, unused to humor in times like these. "More, my lord. They say the Master of Whispers knows the father of every child in the city, and the trueborns too. The gold cloaks are trying to quiet them, but—" Tyrion interrupted, pinching the bridge of his nose. "You cannot silence a storm with swords, Podrick. When the wind blows hard enough, even the walls of the Red Keep begin to whistle." "Ah." He glanced toward the window, where bells tolled in the night. A long and lonely sound. "Fine, Bronn. I want eyes on the Sept, the docks, the Gate of the Gods, and the King's Road. If anyone tries to flee the city tonight, I want to know." Podrick nodded, vanishing without another word. Tyrion remained, alone with his thoughts, watching the slow dance of the dying flames. In the Queen's solar, Cersei's fury had settled into something colder, more poisonous, a venom that ran quietly beneath her skin. She stared into the looking glass, her own face pale, pinched, the eyes rimmed with red. Her hands trembled as she tore open another scroll, the wax seal still bearing the spider's mocking mark. The words inside were fewer now, but sharper, as if Varys himself had pressed the quill with special care. "You will find that blood is stronger than gold, and sometimes even more dangerous." She tore the letter in half, then quarters, casting it into the fire. Behind her, Qyburn hovered, hands folded, waiting for the outburst. "Do you trust them, Qyburn?" she asked, eyes never leaving the flames. "My lords, my knights, my council, do you trust any of them?" "I trust what can be seen, your grace," Qyburn replied, voice soothing. "And what is done in darkness cannot long remain hidden. Secrets come to light, but so too do those who would use them for their own ends." She turned, anger breaking through the mask of calm. "The city is a nest of traitors. I want every messenger stopped at the gates, every raven intercepted. If a single word leaves the capital—" "It may already be too late," Qyburn ventured, soft as ever. "The wildfire is burning beneath our feet." Cersei moved to the window, hands gripping the ledge so hard her knuckles whitened. She gazed out over the rooftops, the towers, the distant fires of the city. Somewhere in the maze of streets, the bastard son of Robert Baratheon lived and worked, oblivious to the storm his name would conjure. "Find Gendry," she said, voice raw. "Bring him to me. Alive if you can. But bring him." Qyburn bowed and slipped away, silent as smoke. At Storm's End, the rain battered the towers, and Davos Seaworth stood before Stannis Baratheon, reading the same words by candlelight. The chamber stank of damp wool and burned tallow. Stannis's jaw worked as he listened, eyes alight with that feverish intensity Davos had come to dread. So Varys would have the realm believe that Robert's bastards are true heirs, Stannis muttered. "As if blood is all that makes a king." Davos shifted uncomfortably. "My lord, there's talk all along the Stormlands. Edric Storm has been seen in the company of knights who once wore Renly's colors. Some say he's gathering men. Stannis' mouth curled in distaste. "Let him gather. Bastards breed like flies, but flies do not rule. I am Robert's brother. I am the king." Davos hesitated. "And if the tale is true, about Jon Snow in the north?" Stannis was silent for a long time. At last he said, "I met the boy at the wall. There is honor in him and danger. If he is Rhaegar's get, he may find fools enough to follow him north and south alike." He turned, cloak swirling. "The time for patience is over, Onion Knight." Send riders to every lord who holds a grudge against Lannister or Tyrell. Tell them, only Stannis keeps his blood clean. Only Stannis is king by right. And Edric Storm? Davos pressed. Stannis' eyes burned. He's Robert's son. Find him and bring him to me. We shall see what the gods will. At Winterfell, the news had not yet arrived in the form of a letter, but it carried on the wind, the uneasy crackle of shifting loyalties, the way men muttered in the yard, and the small folk shied from the eyes of their lords. Sansa walked the battlements with Brienne at her side, cloak drawn close, hair blowing like a banner behind her. She saw the worry in the faces of her people, the flicker of doubt in their eyes. Arya rode out at dawn, vanishing with her wolf into the woods, returning at dusk with blood on her blade, and a haunted look. Bran, lost in his own visions, muttered riddles of roots and bones, speaking of secrets that would change the world. It was Jon who felt it most keenly. He stood before Ned Stark's tomb in the crypts, a candle in one hand, a raven's letter in the other. Sam's hand had written it, but the words inside were Varys, cool and clear as ice. You are not your father's son, but you are still a Stark, or perhaps something more. Jon read the words again, lips moving silently, the candle flickering as he breathed. He thought of Ned, his grave face, the stern love in his eyes. He remembered Lyanna's statue, the flowers forever crumbling in her stony lap. He wondered, for the 100th time, who he truly was. Above him, footsteps echoed on the flagstones. Sansa appeared, her face pale in the dim light. You've heard, she said softly. Jon nodded. It changes nothing, doesn't it? Her voice was tremulous, uncertain. If you're not Ned's son. I am, Jon said more fiercely than he felt. I am his son in every way that matters. Sansa looked away. The lords are restless. They say your blood makes you a king. Some want you to ride south. Some want you to stay, to keep the peace. Jon turned the letter in his hands, the wax flaking away. Let them say what they like. I swore a vow to the Night's Watch. My place is here. But as he said it, the words rang hollow. His duty was a shifting thing now, caught between the ghosts of his past and the blood that flowed in his veins. In Dorne, the sand snakes gathered in the water gardens, cloaked in the scents of orange blossoms and wet stone. Arianne Martell watched them from her balcony, fingers drumming the balustrade. Obara practiced with her spear in the grass, each movement sharp and precise. Nymeria poured wine, her eyes hooded, her thoughts unreadable. Tiny braided her hair, the gold of her locks shining in the sun. A letter lay open on the table before them, the Martell's sun and spear pressed into the seal. So, Arianne said, voice light, Varys would have us believe that bastardy is a mask we may remove at will, that the world is a game, and the rules change as the players do. Nymeria smiled thinly. Bastard or princess, it is all the same. Men will hate us for our blood, or love us for it. Neither lasts. Obara stabbed the air, her face fierce. If the world wants war, give it war. The Viper's daughters are not afraid of blood. Arianne's gaze swept over her cousins, pride warring with fear. She remembered her father's warnings, the careful lessons of caution and patience. But Dorne was restless, its blood hot and quick to anger. If the realm tears itself apart over these secrets, we must be ready, bastard or trueborn. We are still Martells. We protect our own. She gathered the letter, folding it with careful hands. Send word to every lord in the marches. The time for peace may be ending. At the Eyrie the air was thinner, the wind crueler. Maya Stone looked out over the vale, her hands calloused, her hair wild. She had heard the rumors, whispers from traveling merchants, the drunken boasts of sellswords. Some claimed she was Robert's daughter, rightful lady of Storm's End. Others said she was the bastard of a hedge knight, her mother a washerwoman. She did not care. She climbed the mountain paths as she always had, swift and sure as a goat. She brought water to the bloody gate, bread to the kitchens, wordless comfort to her mother's grave. But late at night, when the moon was full, she let herself dream of more, of banners flying beneath her own sigil. of castles and courts, and the power to write her own story. In the shadows, a messenger watched her, cloak drawn close. When she returned to her cottage, a letter awaited her on the table, the seal already broken. Your father was a king. The realm is changing. Come to King's Landing and learn who you are. She read the words and smiled, sharp and sad. The road to King's Landing was long and dangerous, but she had walked harder paths. She packed her things at dawn, kissed her mother's grave, and began the descent. In the heart of King's Landing, the brothels were humming with nervous laughter. Shay heard the stories from men drunk with fear and hope, soldiers and merchants alike. The name Varys was on every tongue. Who was a bastard? Who was not? Did it matter if you were rich, if you were royal, if you were lucky? In a hidden room, Varys met again with Littlefinger. This time the mood darker, more wary. The table was set with sweetmeats and wine, untouched. Their voices were barely above whispers. You've unleashed chaos, Littlefinger accused, eyes glittering. Is that what you wanted? To see the world burn? Varys shook his head, grave. I wanted to see the truth free. Men are not slaves to blood, but to the lies they tell about it. Littlefinger snorted. You think they will thank you for it? No, they will drown in their own bile. Power flows to those who take it, not those with the purest blood. Yet power built on lies is a house of cards, Varys replied softly. I would see the realm built anew, stronger for all its pain. Littlefinger laughed, cold and joyless. You are a fool then, and I am a greater fool for listening. He stood, straightening his cloak. The game has changed, Varys. You will not find it so easy to control the pieces now. He left, leaving Varys alone with the bitter taste of victory. Word reached the wall at last, carried on a swift-winged raven. Sam read it first, hands trembling, then brought it to Jon in the dark of morning. Jon read the letter without expression, then handed it back. What do you think? He asked. Sam hesitated. I think you are who you've always been, but the realm, they may want you for more. Jon laughed, hollow. The realm wants a dragon or a wolf, depending on the day. I am neither. You are both, Sam said quietly. Or maybe something else. Maybe something new. Jon stared out at the dawn, the horizon bleeding with color. The past does not bind us, Sam, but it will not let us go either. Sam placed a hand on his shoulder. Whatever comes, I stand with you. Jon nodded, grateful and afraid. In the Riverlands, the black banners of House Blackwood fluttered in the wet wind. A squire delivered a letter to Lord Tytos Blackwood, who read it in silence, then burned it over a guttering candle. His own bastard son, Hoster Rivers, watched from the shadows, uncertain. Elsewhere, at Harrenhal, a woman known as Went's ghost received her own letter, the words inside promising answers to questions she had never dared to ask. She tucked it away and vanished into the maze of corridors, her story waiting to be written. As the days stretched into weeks, the shape of the realm began to shift. Lords rode out with more men at their backs. Small folk grumbled, uncertain who would rule when the dust settled. Old grudges surfaced, and new alliances were born in secret. The city itself became a pressure cooker. At night, the bells tolled for every man hanged as a traitor, every bastard claimed or denied. Gold cloaks hunted names on royal orders. The faith militant sharpened their swords, waiting for the gods to speak. In the house of Black and White, across the narrow sea, Arya heard the stories too. She practiced her new faces before the glass, wondering if her own parentage would matter if no one could ever see her true self again. One night, in the dungeons beneath the Red Keep, Varys walked with Tyrion, their path lit only by the glow of a single torch. Is it worth it? Tyrion asked, his voice weary. All this chaos. Varys stopped, turning the torch until the shadows leaped. I have seen what happens when secrets fester, my lord. I have seen good men die for the lies of their fathers, and children slain for the crimes of their mothers. If the truth brings war, perhaps that is the price we pay for peace. Tyrion watched him a long moment, then shrugged. You may be right, or you may simply be another player, shuffling the pieces for your own amusement. Varys smiled, thin and sad. We are all players, Lord Tyrion. The difference is whether we remember that the board is built of bones. And Trey. They moved on, the torchlight fading behind them. In a lonely inn on the King's Road, Gendry sat by the fire, a mug of ale in his hand. A stranger took the bench beside him, pushing back his hood to reveal a battered, honest face. "You're Gendry? The smith?" Gendry glanced up, wary. "Who's asking?" The man smiled. "A friend. There's talk in the city. A war coming, and your name at the heart of it." Gendry snorted. "I'm no lord. I'm no king. Just a bastard." The stranger's eyes warmed. "Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it's everything." "Danor." He rose, clapping Gendry on the shoulder. "Come to River Run, if you want to see what your name is worth." Gendry watched him go, the firelight turning the man's hair to gold. He sipped his ale, considering, the seed of a dangerous hope taking root in his heart. As the seasons turned, the Game of Thrones grew crueler, the rules ever shifting. But for the first time in living memory, the bastards of Westeros stood tall, no longer mere shadows at the edges of history, but players in the storm to come. And in the quiet spaces between power and chaos, the realm held its breath, waiting for the next revelation. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 941 A24,000 244 725. In Ka. The sky above King's Landing thickened with the promise of another storm. Dawn crept across the city's rooftops, rain-soaked tiles glistening in the pale light, the air hanging heavy with a kind of silence that presages disaster. Even the birds seemed subdued, as if wary of their own songs carrying secrets on the wind. In the Red Keep, hallways that once thrummed with the business of courtly life now echoed with watchful footsteps, and the tension that curled through every chamber was as palpable as the humidity pressing in from Blackwater Bay. Varys watched it all from the sanctuary of his network, moving like a shadow from cell to cell, his little birds darting before him. Children, kitchen boys, washerwomen, men who owed him favors or feared his power. Secrets had always been his weapon, but now those same secrets made him a target for every desperate noble whose lineage teetered on the edge of legitimacy. As the city awoke, its lords and ladies eyed their bastards with new suspicion, and their true-born heirs with sharper, more frantic calculation. Across the city, in the stately gloom of Maegor's Holdfast, Queen Cersei gripped a cup of sweet wine as she listened to a morning report. The Goldcloaks were at their wits' end, she was told. Riots threatened in the Flea Bottom, and at the Dragon Gate, a mob had battered a septon half to death after had dared preach on the nature of sin and birthright. The Bakers' Guild was striking, and dockside whores had declared a festival in honor of the cities, new princes and princesses. The chaos that Cersei had always believed she could control was beginning to spiral beyond her grasp. She turned her gaze to Qyburn, who waited with the calm patience of a vulture. "Has Gendry been found?" she asked, her voice a brittle thread. "Not yet, your grace," he replied, unctuous. "But the master armorer has vanished, and several men-at-arms were seen in the Smithy district last night. Hunting." Cersei sipped her wine, lips red as blood. "Double the reward. Bring me the boy. Kill anyone who shelters him. Burn the forges if you must." Qyburn inclined his head, his smile slight and knowing. "Of course, your grace." But even as his footsteps faded, Cersei felt the world slipping away. The very blood of kings had been turned into a weapon by her enemies, and no wall, no matter how high or thick, could keep a secret once it took wing. Gendry ran through the city's bowels as a hunted animal, breath ragged in his chest. He knew every alley and cut, every crumbling stone. Tabelmont was gone, the shop emptied overnight, leaving only cold ashes in the forge. Word had spread quickly, Goldcloaks asking after a dark-haired boy with blue eyes and arms strong as any lord's, promising coin or death, and it was hard to tell which would come first. He hid in the shadows, trusting in old friends, sleeping rough. He dared not go to the brothels or the inns he had once frequented. He found himself thinking of Arya, her wild, fearless laughter, her certainty that any bastard could be a prince if he chose. But Gendry did not want to be a prince or a lord or anything but what he had always been. The city, however, would not let him be. One evening, as dusk settled over the Blackwater, a stranger found him huddled behind the ruins of a burned sept, eyes wild, hands raw and shaking. "You're Gendry," the man said. "You have your father's jaw. Come. There are friends who'll hide you. You cannot stay here." Gendry almost ran. But exhaustion, hope, and terror wrestled within him, and in the end, he let himself be led through winding streets, through the ratways, into the darkness. On the King's Road, Maya Stone journeyed south, traveling alone and swiftly. She dressed as a boy, her hair cut rough, her pack light. The valleys and hills of the Vale gave way to the green gold of the riverlands, and the farther she went from home, the more the world changed around her. She heard rumors at every inn. A blacksmith's son with royal blood hunted by the Queen's men. A Stark bastard whispered to be the true heir of dragons. Dornish girls laying claim to castles, and the very nature of inheritance upended. Sometimes Maya allowed herself to imagine what it would mean to walk into the Red Keep and demand her birthright. But then she remembered the hands of her mother, rough but gentle, braiding her hair before dawn, telling her that a name was less important than the strength to survive. In her heart, she wanted only to see the world as it was, to measure herself against its dangers, and decide for herself what kind of woman she would be. At a crossroads in outside Stony Sept, a rider in dark martell colors hailed her. "You ride south, alone. Most turn north these days." Maya looked the stranger up and down. "I have business in King's Landing." The rider smiled. "And is your business with blood or with crowns?" "Neither," Maya replied. "My business is with myself." The rider laughed, nodding as if satisfied. "Then you may live long enough to see how little difference there is." She rode on, the road unfurling before her, the storm clouds gathering at her back. The word spread to Winterfell as a raven's cry, black wings beating across the dawn sky. Jon Snow walked the walls, ghostly pale beneath the northern sun. He watched the approach of men in Lannister crimson and Baratheon gold, banners bright and hungry. Sansa waited by his side, her gaze fixed on the horizon, her voice low. "They are coming for you," she said, a tremor in her words. "Not as a brother or a friend, but as a threat." Jon sighed. "If they come for me, they come for the North. And if you are not a Stark," she pressed. "I am more Stark than anything. It is the blood in your veins, yes, but also the choices you make. Ned Stark raised me. Winterfell raised me. I will not abandon it." Sansa turned away. "Words will not stop them. Blood will." All horns sounded below. The lords of the North assembled in the great hall, murmurs hissing through the stone like wind through dead leaves. Jon entered last, the eyes of every bannerman upon him. The air was thick with uncertainty and pride. Lord Manderly spoke first. Voice sonorous. "My lord, my king, if I may call you so, the realm is in uproar. The South says you're Targaryen. They say you have a claim." Jon's jaw tightened. "I want no crown. I want only to keep the North safe." Another lord, tall and thin, bristled. "But if you have dragon blood, are you not a danger to us all? Fire and blood are not the Stark way." Jon's gaze swept the hall. "I am not the South. I am not a dragon. I am a wolf. But I will meet whatever challenge comes, as Ned Stark taught me." Then Shesinoa. The lords studied him, their decision unspoken. But Jon felt the tides shifting. Whether he wished it or not, his blood now belonged to history, and all its battles. At Storm's End, Edric Storm stood in the yard, the rain soaking his dark hair, as he watched Stannis Baratheon's banners unfurl in the wind. The castle had been his home since childhood, but never had he felt its walls so cold, so filled with eyes that measured him, weighed him. Lord Stannis summoned him at sunset, a flickering candle the only light in the hall. Edric entered, boots leaving muddy tracks, his chin up, defiant. "You sent for me, my lord?" he said, voice steady. Stannis regarded him a long moment. Face unreadable. "You have heard the tales." "Yes. That I am Robert's true son. That I am a threat." Stannis' lips tightened. "Do you wish to be king?" Edric shook his head. "I wish to be free." A ghost of a smile flickered on Stannis' lips. "Freedom is a crown that weighs more than any gold. My brother never understood that." He leaned forward, voice low. "They will come for you, boy. Not because you are a king, but because you are a symbol. Men fight for symbols. Prepare yourself." "No." Edric nodded, understanding more than he wished. The days of innocence had ended, and the Game of Thrones would spare no one, least of all a king's bastard. In Dorne, the heat was thick and sweet, but beneath it, the sand snakes plotted like coiled vipers. Arianne Martell convened a council beneath a canopy of pomegranate trees, her dress cut to bare her shoulders, the better to remind the men before her that power came in many forms. Nymeria Sand read the latest letter aloud, her voice clear and ringing. "Varys claims one of us is trueborn. He names me, or perhaps Obara, or Tyane. It matters not. The game is the same. The lords of the marches grow bold. They think Dorne is divided." Arianne surveyed her cousins, eyes sharp as glass. "Let them come. We will remind them that a Martell, bastard or true, is not so easily broken." Obara slammed her fist on the table. "We should march on the Reach, take the fight to them. They think us weak." Arianne smiled. "We will not march, but we will not cower. I have sent word to King's Landing. Dorne will not be divided by a eunuch's whispers." "Three." Tiny brushed a pomegranate seed from her lips. "And if the truth comes out, if one of us is princess, what then?" Arianne's smile faded. "Then we make our own fate. Blood is a river. It can flood, or it can nourish. I will not let mine drown me." Beyond the narrow sea, Arya Stark moved through Bravos as no one, slipping from mask to mask. Yet even here, she could not escape the shifting winds. The faceless men spoke in riddles, their lessons laced with warnings. "Names are masks," the kindly man said, his eyes old and deep. "Blood is a story. Would you let your story be told by another?" Arya paused, her hand on the hilt of her blade. "A girl is not a princess. No, but a girl may be a queen, or a shadow, or a blade in the dark. Beware the stories that make you their prisoner." Arya listened. She watched. She dreamed of home. In the cellars beneath the Red Keep, Tyrion Lannister confronted Varys one last time. The flickering torchlight painted them both in shades of gold and shadow. "You have torn the world open," Tyrion accused, his words heavy with wine and weariness. "And what do you see in the blood and dust?" Varys studied him, fingers steepled. "I see a chance, a slim chance, for something better. Or perhaps only for change. The realm has lived in lies too long." Tyrion sighed, swirling his goblet. "You give them truth, but you cannot give them peace." "No," Varys agreed softly. "Only the chance to find it." Their words echoed, mingling with the groans of the stones, the distant thunder, the cries of a city waking to its own undoing. As the storm broke over King's Landing, lightning searing the sky, the river of secrets spilled over its banks. The gold cloak seized men and boys by the dozens, dragging them before the Queen's justice. The small folk rioted, looting the granaries and shrines, tearing down banners, cursing every house and every lord. At the Sept of Beeler, the High Sparrow stepped out onto the steps, his voice rising above the chaos. "All men are equal in the eyes of the Seven. Bastard or lord, sinner or saint. The world is not written in blood alone." A stone struck him, splitting his brow, but he did not falter. The faith militant drew swords, and the city trembled. Within the Red Keep, Tommen Baratheon huddled in his mother's chambers, flinching at every shout and crash from below. Cersei held him tight, her whispers frantic, her plans unspooling. They would ride for Casterly Rock, she decided. Or perhaps Dragonstone. Somewhere, anywhere, that blood and rumor could not reach. But nowhere was safe. In every hall, in every alley, the truth marched, relentless as a tide. Far to the north, Jon stood atop Winterfell's walls as the storm clouds rolled in. The air was sharp, clean, the snow beginning to fall. Ghost pressed close at his side, fur bristling. He heard the cries of the men below, the arguments of his lords, the doubt in every glance. Yet as the snow thickened, something steadied within him. He was not the boy who'd come to Winterfell as a stranger. He was not just a bastard, nor just a Stark. He was himself. The sum of every choice, every loss, every love. The world might break on the wheel of blood, but Jon would not. He would stand for Winterfell, for the North, for the truth that men and women were more than their father's sins. As the first true snow of winter coated the stones, Jon looked south and felt the world waiting, breath held. And somewhere, deep in the vaults of the Red Keep, Varys sealed another letter, the ink still wet. It read only, "The world is changing. Prepare to fight." He sent the bird, watched it vanish into the storm, and wondered what might rise when the last lie fell away. Ka. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 941 F547 44 before 732 Bine. K. K. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 941 A791 E32070 AK. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 941 and B9 T-Cone 487 Bine K. A Nede. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 941 of 88 B benign. Zerod 7 34 Bine K. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 941 B2 828 18 F7 7717 Bian. Ka. A. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 941 Bab 470 A1 DB Anju Aidine Kanid. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 941 BC 6086 at 715 Benine. Gao. Hutshay. Shao. Night bled into morning over King's Landing, and the city did not sleep. Even the drunks in the alleys kept one wary eye open, and the rats scurried with an anxious purpose. Lanterns burned in every window. At the heart of the Red Keep, the storm's fury rattled the high towers and battered the city walls. No one in the castle's upper rooms could ignore the wind's howl, or the distant tumult of crowds gathering in the squares below. Lightning forked behind the curtain of rain, casting monstrous shadows across the stones. In a hidden chamber, Varys sat at a long table, parchment strewn before him, his bald head glistening with sweat. He worked tirelessly, little birds coming and going at intervals, each bringing news of new violence or rumor, of doors kicked in and bastards hauled before magistrates, of banners torn down and others raised in their place. The air was heavy with the scent of wax and ink, and beneath it, the lingering sweetness of rot, the subtle decay of a system that had ruled for centuries, now coming undone in real time. He wrote in silence, sending missives by raven and hand, every word measured, every secret dropped with surgical precision. He could feel the realm shifting, could sense the old powers flinching as the truths he'd released circled them like wolves. Outside, the storm was only beginning. The real tempest was the one within men's hearts. Down the length of the table, a gaunt young woman watched him, face half concealed by a tangle of black hair. "What do you hope to make from this, Lord Varys?" she asked, voice low, all venom spent. "A better world, or simply a different master?" Varys glanced up, measuring her with the same practiced gaze he'd given 100 kings. "That depends on the choices men make with the truths I've given them," he replied. "The world does not become better on its own. It must be remade, again and again, by those who can imagine it." "Nand," she snorted softly, standing to leave, but she did not contradict him. He watched her go, then turned back to his parchment, writing the next letter to a certain lord in the Vale, and a second to Old Town, to an archmaester known for his appetite for scandal. Outside the city walls, tents rose like mushrooms on muddy ground. The Tyrell host was encamped along the Roserad, banners drooping in the rain, soldiers hunched beneath dripping awnings. In a richly appointed tent, Mace Tyrell paced, red-faced and muttering, while his mother Olenna sat in her traveling chair, fingers knitting wool as her eyes darted with ferocious calculation. Sir Loras stood by the flap, armor polished but his face drawn with worry. "The city is aflame, grandmother. They say the Queen's men are hunting the bastards. There are riots by the Sept." Olenna did not stop her knitting. "Let Cersei hunt who she likes. She can't kill all the secrets. The truth will spread faster than fire through a field of wheat." Mace rounded on her. "If the Queen falls, what then? We are exposed. Lady Margaery." "Margaery is cleverer than any of them," Olenna snapped. "She'll keep her crown if anyone can. But you, stop pacing. A general who acts like a frightened goose is no comfort to his men. Sit down, Mace, before you wear out the carpet." Reluctantly, Mace obeyed. "Will they come for us, do you think?" "Not yet," Olenna said. "But they will. Sooner or later, every lord must answer for the children he's sired or hidden. This is only the beginning, my dear. The question is, who will write the next chapter?" "Them'll tell. Petupper Feymar." Outside, the storm's thunder rolled over the plain, and the Tyrells waited, hearts pounding for what dawn would bring. In the Riverlands, the great lords assembled at River Run. The Blackfish presided, grayer and harder than before, flanked by his kin and an array of lesser houses. Word from the south had arrived with the latest batch of bedraggled refugees. King's Landing in uproar, the north mustering, Dorne restless, and everywhere the bastards rising. Lady Brienne of Tarth stood quietly beside the hearth, sword belted at her side, listening as Edmure Tully argued with Lord Frey's envoy. She did not speak, but her eyes lingered on a young woman at the edge of the gathering. A girl with pale brown hair and a stubborn chin, who wore a simple dress and carried herself with the wariness of one unused to crowd. Maya Stone, the Blackfish had said, summoned from the Vale by a letter written in a hand she had never seen. "She's not our problem," the Frey man barked. "We have enough bastards running loose without adopting more." Edmure scowled. "She is Robert's blood, Frey. If Varys is right, she has more claim to the Stormlands than half the would-be kings. She must be hurt." The Blackfish lifted a hand. "Let her speak for herself. Girl, what do you want?" Maya glanced at the lords, then at Brienne. "I want to see justice done. I want to see the world where a bastard can be more than a footnote in a dead king's ledger. If your halls have room for truth, I'll stand with you. If not, I'll find my own road." The lords murmured, uneasy. The Blackfish nodded. "You're welcome at River Run, Stone or Storm or Tully. You have my word." Dundrendin. South of the city, on the mudflats of Blackwater Bay, Arya Stark landed in the company of a merchant galley. She wore the face of a low-born girl, hair cropped and stained, but her eyes missed nothing. She heard the city's unrest before she saw it, the shouts at the gates, the curses of refugees turned away, the distant crack of fire and the braying of horns. She made her way through the crowd, slipping between soldiers and beggars, until she reached the house where she'd last heard rumor of Gendry. He was there, battered but alive, surrounded by smiths and sellswords, men who had once called him boy and now watched him with a measure of awe. Arya entered without knocking. Gendry rose, axe in hand, but his expression changed to shock as she dropped her mask. "Arya?" She grinned. "You're harder to kill than you look." He embraced her. laughter and fear mingling in his voice. "They're hunting me. The Queen's men, the gold cloaks. Everyone." "I know," Arya said, scanning the windows. "But you're not alone. The world's changed. The Highborn are just as scared as you are. Some of them want you dead. Some want you crowned." "Yeah." Gendry's jaw tightened. "I don't want their crown." Arya nodded. "Want's got nothing to do with it. But you can choose your road. You can run or you can fight." He met her gaze, uncertain. "And you?" She shrugged. "I'm Arya Stark. I fight." Across the water, in Dorne, Arianne Martell moved among her father's gardens, dispatching messages to every corner of the southern coast. The sand snakes rode out, spreading news and sowing dissent, and the lords of the marches grumbled behind closed doors. Dorne had always been a land apart. Now it threatened to become the crucible for a new order. Obara rode north with a band of Sellswords, her spear sharp and her anger sharper. Nymeria traveled east, seeking allies among the exiles and pirates. Tyene moved through the courts of Sunspear, her poisons hidden in perfume and flattery. Arianne's own letters were blunt and uncompromising. "We are not defined by our father's sins, nor by the slanders of eunuchs and Lannisters," she wrote. "If the world wishes to know what a true-born princess of Dorne is made of, let them come and see." At night, she stood alone on her balcony, watching the moon rise over the desert. She wondered what her mother would have thought of the world unraveling, of daughters raised up where sons had failed. She wondered if, when the last blood was spilled, there would be anything left worth ruling. At Winterfell, the nights grew colder, and Jon Snow presided over councils where every decision was a gamble. The lords debated whether to march south or close their gates and wait for the realm to settle its own accounts. Some argued to send Jon to King's Landing as a peacemaker or conqueror. Others wanted to name Sansa as Lady of Winterfell and send Jon to the Wall to appease the old gods and new. Lyanna Mormont spoke up, voice clear as winter air. "He is our king, blood or no. If the South calls him dragon, let them burn. He is the North's son." Jon met her gaze, grateful, but heavy with responsibility. "I am no king," he repeated. "I did not ask for any of this. But I will not leave the North undefended. If war comes, we meet it here." Nepi. Maester Walken entered, bearing a sealed message. "A raven from the wall," he announced. Jon broke the seal and read. His face darkened. "The dead are stirring," he said. "White walkers in the woods, wildlings fleeing south. The night's watch is hard-pressed." The lords grew silent. Sansa laid a hand on his arm. "The world wants to fight over names and crowns, but winter is here." Jon nodded. "Let them come. The North remembers." Ninanchiman. But on Dragonstone, Daenerys Targaryen stood atop a wind-swept battlement, staring across the churning sea. Her dragons circled above, their cries lost to the wind. Tyrion stood beside her, watching her with careful eyes. "So," he said at last, "the realm is eating itself over secrets and parentage. Bastards raised up, kings threatened, old names crumbling." Daenerys did not smile. "Names are wind. Thrones are built of blood, not paper. I will not fight for old lies. I will break them." "And if you are not the last Targaryen?" Tyrion asked softly. "I am the blood of the dragon," she said. "No eunuch secret will change that. But I will make my own house and my own name. If others wish to join me, so be it." Tyrion nodded, thoughtful. "The world is yours to shape, if you are ruthless enough to shape it." She looked at him. "I will be." In the halls of Old Town, the Archmaesters convened in the Citadel's highest chamber, arguing over the veracity of Varys proofs. Scrolls and birth records, confessions and letters, each was examined, doubted, challenged. The younger acolytes whispered of war and prophecy. The elders spoke only of preservation. Archmaester Marwyn, thick and impatient, slammed a fist on the table. "The world is burning. Knowledge will not save us if the lords do not believe it. Send word to every great house. Truth or lie, let them decide. The Citadel is not a court. At the far end of the table, a frail old man whispered, "The dragons are stirring, and so are the wolves." The archmaesters dispersed, but their letters fanned the fire. From the Dreadfort to the Arbor, from Gulltown to Sunspear, the world reeled and bucked. Armies marched. Spies ran. Old alliances broke and new ones, uneasy and fleeting, took their place. In every castle, every hamlet, men and women woke to the knowledge that they might be more, or less, than they had believed. And at the heart of it, in the blackest hours before the new day, Varys slipped through the Red Keep's corridors, his own future as uncertain as any. In his hands, the fates of kings and bastards alike trembled, waiting for the moment he would let go and let the realm decide what it would become. As the bells of the city rang out, funeral, warning, celebration all at once, 1,000 stories began to unfold, and the true cost of truth revealed itself in blood, hope, and the ashes of old certainties. On a windswept hill outside the city, a pale sunrise broke through the last shreds of cloud, and the first living things to greet it were the crows, circling over a new world. Okay. In the cold hush before dawn, as mist rose in curling skeins over the fields beyond King's Landing, the city's bells told their uneven warning. A city of secrets had become a city of reckoning. What had begun as a distant tremor now rippled in every household, every council, every chamber where a lord or lady might whisper, or weep, or sharpen a blade. The truth had seeped in, slow as poison, until no one could recall the taste of ordinary fear. Only the new raw dread that comes from realizing nothing was what it seemed. The Red Keep bristled with gold cloaks, their boots echoing on marble as they prowled for enemies real and imagined. Qyburn spies reported the comings and goings of lords, knights, and every bastard who dared claim noble blood. In the great hall, Cersei Lannister held court not as a queen, but as a beast surrounded. Her voice was razor thin, her eyes colder than the steel at her belt. A new group of prisoners was marched in, boys, girls, men, women. Some bruised, others proud, a few weeping. Their names were read aloud. Gendry Waters Milestone, a pale-haired boy from the Street of Silk named Tabar Flowers. The Highborn watched, silent, as Cersei questioned each in turn, searching their faces for weakness. Gendry, filthy and unbowed, met her gaze with the stubbornness of a born smith. "My father was a king, but I am no king. I ask nothing of you, your grace." Cersei's lip curled. "And if I made you a prince, would you swear to me?" He shook his head. "I'd rather make swords than promises." Maya stood taller, hands clenched. "I come for justice, not crowns. If you fear us, it is because you know what your family has stolen." A hush fell. Some in the court shifted, unsure, as the world they had ruled slipped further away with every unafraid answer. Cersei waved a hand. "Take them away. Let them rot until the mob forgets their names." As they were dragged off, Qyburn leaned close. "It would be easier, your grace, to kill them quietly, end the line and the whispers." But Cersei, for all her venom, was too proud to let fear rule her so openly. "No. The city watches. The realm watches. They must see that I am still queen." Qyburn bowed. For now. In the twisting streets below, Arya Stark moved through the chaos like a shadow. Her face changed by the hour. A baker's daughter, a stable boy, a washerwoman with a chipped tooth, and a stooped gait. She watched the gold cloaks drag Gendry and Maya toward the dungeons, her heart pounding with an old, sharp anger. But she did not strike, not yet. She was Arya of Winterfell, and no prison built by men could keep her from those she would save. That night, as storm winds howled, Arya slipped into the Red Keep through a forgotten postern gate. She crept past drowsing guards, down spiraling steps slick with damp, her feet silent on cold stone. At the door to the cells, she found a boy no older than Bran, his eyes wide with terror. "Help me," he whispered. "Later," Arya murmured, flashing a knife. First, the smith and the girl. She found them in a cell, chained together, bruised but unbroken. Gendry started at the sight of her, as if seeing a ghost. "Arya?" "Quiet," she breathed, ticking the lock. "We're leaving." Maya regarded her with cool appraisal. "You have a plan." Arya grinned, the old Stark mischief shining through the grime. "Always." With Gendry's strength and Arya's quick hands, the chains fell away. They slipped out through secret ways, past cells filled with men muttering of dragons and wolves, bastards and trueborn. As dawn lightened the sky, they vanished into the teeming city, their names already legend on the lips of those who would fight for a different world. Beyond the city on the Roserad, the Tyrell camp was alive with rumor and restless nights. Olenna Tyrell received report after report, her wrinkled fingers drumming on the polished wood of her traveling desk. She listened, and she weighed, and she plotted. She knew better than most how little held the realm together. Margaery, radiant in green, moved among the men with a gentle word here, a promise there. Loras rode out every morning, seeking news, seeking battle, seeking absolution for old shames he would never name. Mace fretted, puffed, and boasted, but Olenna ignored him as she ignored all men who confused noise for power. "The time will come," she told Margaery as they walked in the morning sun. "These truths Varys has spilled. They cannot be gathered again. You must be ready." "For war?" Margaery asked. "For peace, if you can make it. For war, if you must. But above all, for survival. Remember, queens are made in chaos. Be the one who offers hope, not just a crown." Margaery nodded. In her heart, she mourned the world she had dreamed of. The world where love, or wit, or beauty might be enough. But those were children's dreams. The grown world was sharper. At River Run, a council of northern and river lords met beneath banners, limp with damp. Jon Snow's name was on every tongue, as was the threat of the White Walkers. Edmure Tully presided with a new stiffness. The Blackfish counseled caution. Brienne of Tarth listened, eyes grave, as reports from the wall told of dead men walking. Maya Stone stood beside Lord Blackwood, no longer ignored or shunned, but included. She had fought in the yard, ridden with the scouts, proven herself among men who once called her bastard as a curse. Now, they listened to her thoughts on strategy and supply. A messenger from the north arrived, soaked and shaking. "Jon Snow holds Winterfell. The White Walkers are moving. The north calls for aid." The room fell silent. Then the Blackfish spoke. "The realm squabbles over birth and blood while the dead march. We must choose, the living or the old lies." Maya felt the weight of every gaze. She met it squarely. The living, and the word was passed. Banners would be called, swords drawn, not for kings, but for survival. On Dragonstone, Daenerys Targaryen watched the seas from a high window, silver hair streaming. She read Tyrion's reports, the tales of the bastards risen, the noble lines fray. The dragons circled, impatient, sensing her mood. She summoned Tyrion. "They fear what cannot be controlled. Blood, dragons, truth. They hate the change. But change has come." He nodded. "Will you fight for them or rule over them?" She considered, her eyes distant. "I will offer them fire if they demand it, but mercy if they accept it. The old order is dying. I will not be its executioner, nor its savior. I will be its end." She mounted Drogon that evening, flying above the sea, watching ships below scatter like ants. She saw banners. Baratheon, Tyrell Lannister, all converging, all desperate to preserve or destroy what was left of the old world. In the Citadel, the Archmaesters bickered as only learned men can, flinging accusations and obscure precedents. Marwyn, thick-fingered and booming, addressed the conclave. "The White Walkers are real. The dead are moving. The bastards matter less than the living. Let the great houses waste themselves in their quarrels. We must prepare." Nimero. Acolytes wrote feverishly, but few listened. In a world upended, knowledge alone could not keep them safe. North of the wall, the world had grown colder still. Jon Snow stood among his brothers, ghost at his side, watching the darkness beyond the wall. Messages from the south arrived daily, offers of crown and alliance, threats and appeals. Jon read them and burned them. He called his council. "We fight for the living," he said. "Not for banners. Not for thrones." "Dine." The men cheered, and in that moment, Jon saw a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, when the old lies were buried, something new could grow. In the city, Varys watched from the shadows as the people gathered, hungry, desperate, hopeful. He listened to their stories, the songs they sang of the Smith's son, the whispers of the Wolf Queen in the north, the rumors of dragons flying above the narrow sea. He smiled, thin and tired. He had loosed the truth upon the world, and now it would go where it would. The game was not over. It was only changed. In a candlelit room, he penned his final letter. "The world is not made by kings, but by those who dare to see it new. Let the old truths die. Let the new be born in their place." He sealed it and sent it with his swiftest bird, to fly beyond the city, beyond the war, beyond the reach of any who still believed they could hold back the dawn. And as the sun rose over Westeros, the city that had once been a prison of secrets became at last a crucible of change. Its people, its lords, its bastards, and its queens all waiting to see what new world would emerge from the long, bloody night. As sunlight clawed its way through the mist, King's Landing awoke to uneasy silence. The bells that had tolled warnings in the black hours had fallen quiet, their echoes lost to the thick stone of the city walls. In the markets, sellers set out their wares with nervous glances at every passing soldier. Women drew their children close, men lingered in doorways, and all eyes seemed to follow the black-sailed ships anchored far downriver, their presence as ominous as a dragon's shadow. The Red Keep was a nest of angry wasps. Cersei Lannister paced the Queen's corridor with her face drawn and pale, listening to the shouts of petitioners echoing from below. Each hour brought new chaos, fights in the streets, reports of banners raised and torn, merchants fleeing with their coin, the stench of smoke drifting on the wind from torched houses in Flea Bottom. Her power, once a steady current, now surged and ebbed with every rumor that swept the city. She stopped outside Tommen's chamber and pressed a hand to the heavy door. Her sons weeping on the other side broke her in ways she could never admit. She could not afford softness. Not now, not with the city poised to tear itself apart over the very blood that ran in their veins. In the council chamber, Kevan Lannister presided over a meeting grown increasingly fraught. Qyburn read aloud the latest reports from the gates, banners of House Tyrell sighted at the Gold Road, Dothraki riders seen in the Riverlands, and in the city, an upsurge in men and women claiming descent from noble houses. Some carry proof, letters, rings, even birth records smuggled from Sep's or Maester's chests. Many, I fear, are simply liars hoping for a meal or a sword. Qyburn finished, his eyes shining with ghoulish delight. Kevan scowled. Let them come. Let every bastard in the city knock on the doors of the great Septi. It changes nothing. What matters is steel, gold, and food, and right now we have less of all three than yesterday. The Queen swept into the chamber, her green velvet gown dragging through soot and ash, tracked in by a score of restless boots. "You think swords will hold the city?" she demanded. "When half the men who wield them question whether their lord is truly their father, whether the coin in their purse is theirs by birthright or theft." Kevan met her gaze, weary. "What would you have me do, Your Grace?" Cersei pressed her hands together, knuckles white. "Order. We must have order. The mob must see strength. Gather every able knight, patrol the city, execute rioters publicly, feed the poor, if only to quiet them. Any who claim noble birth are to be held for questioning. No exceptions." She glared at the faces around the table. Qyburn nodded with delight. Pycelle blinked. The rest shifted in their seats. Only Varys, gliding in through the shadows, offered her a thin, unreadable smile. Kevan rose. "As you command, Your Grace." Beneath the keep, Arya led Gendry and Maya through winding tunnels cut long before Targaryen fire ever touched Westeros. The stone sweated cold, the walls humming with ancient secrets. Gendry kept one hand on the pommel of a stolen sword, his eyes wary. Nyaya's stride was brisk and certain, as if she'd been sneaking through royal cellars her whole life. "Where to?" Gendry whispered, when Arya paused at a fork. She glanced at him, lips quirking. "Up. We need to reach the city. There are friends above, and there are ships, if we're quick." "Run again?" Maya asked, voice tight with the anger of those who have run too often. "Live, then choose what comes next," Arya replied. They surfaced at the edge of a warren behind the Street of Silk. The city here was a powder keg. Angry crowds clustered around the septs and the gates, chanting the names of lords, some alive, many dead, while gold cloaks eyed them with hands twitching at their hilts. News traveled ahead of them like wildfire. Rumors of dragon riders in the east, a king's bastard in the west, the wolf of the north raising an army for the living. Arya melted into the crowd, dragging her companions behind. Gendry's face was mostly hidden by a cowl, but people still stared. Was it his jaw, so like the old king's, or was it the wild hope that even in chaos, someone true might rise? A hush fell as the crowd parted for a thin, sharp-featured woman in rough leathers. Brienne of Tarth? Battered from the road but upright and unswerving. She caught Arya's eye with a flicker of recognition. "You made it," Brienne said simply. Arya nodded. "We all need out of the city." Brienne jerked her chin toward the docks. "Blackfish is waiting with a skiff. We leave at dusk." Maya touched her arm. "Where do we go?" "Anywhere but here," Brienne said. South of the city, the Tyrell host drew ever nearer. Olenna Tyrell sat beneath a striped pavilion, surrounded by her household, hawk-eyed and unsmiling. Scouts returned every hour with new tales of towns in flames, Lannister men deserting, gold cloaks refusing to open the city gates for anyone save the Queen's personal retinue. Margaery read the dispatches with growing unease. "They are sealing the city, grandmother. No one in, no one out. Which means they're afraid." "Good." Olenna picked at a grape. "A little fear is healthy in a queen. Too much, and she makes mistakes. Send a rider north and another to Dragonstone. If the Lannisters shut us out, perhaps the Starks and Targaryens will have more sense." Loras knelt at her feet, arms braced on his knees. "And if they refuse us, too?" Olenna's voice was acid. "Then you'll put on a white cloak and guard your lovely sister until you die of boredom. But they won't refuse. They need allies as badly as we do." She stood, shooing the others away. Alone, she stared at the city's distant spires and thought of her children, her grandchildren, all the blood and scheming that had brought her to this last, lonely fight. North of the Neck, Jon Snow read the latest raven in the council chamber at Winterfell. The message was coded, but he recognized the hand. Sansa's. "King's Landing is falling to madness. Gendry and Arya escaped. Maya Stone with them. Queen barricades herself in Red Keep. Tyrell's advancing. Word from the Wall, White Walkers gathering. All eyes turn north. They fear the old enemy more than each other. Come south only if you mean to rule." Jon folded the letter and looked to his lords. Davos Seaworth, grim and steadfast. Lyon Olmont, fierce as a summer storm. The tall, silent figure of Tormund Giantsbane. "We hold," Jon said. "We fortify the neck. If the dead break through the wall, there is nowhere to run. But we do not march on King's Landing. Let the South drown in its own secrets." Lyanna's chin rose. "And if they come north?" Jon's eyes narrowed. "Then we remind them the North remembers. And that here, blood is earned, not given." Davos' voice was low. "The old world is dying. What comes next, lad?" "Dant." Jon's thoughts turned to the wall, to the thousands of lost faces, the black crows scattered to winds and snow. He saw Sansa, alone in her tower. Arya, running through shadows. Bran, wherever his strange power had taken him. "We live," Jon said. "Whatever it takes, we live. And when the dead are gone, we build anew." Far across the water, on Dragonstone, Daenerys gathered her council. Grey Worm stood by the doors, unsmiling. Tyrion and Missandei conferred over maps. The air hummed with tension. Reports from King's Landing, Tyrion said. Cersei holds but barely. Tyrell's close at her back, Starks in the north, Riverlords uncertain. Bastards rising in every corner. The city is a cauldron. Bun Maul. Daenerys' lips pressed into a line. And what of the people? They are hungry, tired, afraid, Missandei said quietly. They want someone to save them. Daenerys looked out at her dragons circling the skies. Then we go to them, but not as conquerors, not as monsters. We go as hope. Tyrion's brow furrowed. You would risk your life walking into the city's fire? She nodded. Yes. Because if I do not, then I am no different from those who built this world of secrets and pain. Let them see the last dragon walk among them as a woman, not a myth. Nanai. The council broke. Preparations begun. And as dawn touched the black stones of Dragonstone, Daenerys mounted Drogon and flew alone toward the city that had once killed her father and now threatened to kill itself. In the Riverlands, lords gathered beneath the ancient banners of Tully and Blackwood. Joined now by wildcards, Maya Stone in her simple mail, Gendry Waters still in the battered leathers of a smith, Arya Stark at his side, Brienne guarding them both with steel and grim affection. The Blackfish regarded them all. You are not what the world expected, he said. Bastards, girls, smiths, outlaws. Arya met his gaze. Neither is this world. He nodded. Perhaps that's for the best. Scouts brought news. Refugees fleeing the city. White Walkers on the move. Lords dying and rising with each day's new secret. The Blackfish's word was law. We march. Not for crown or castle, but to break the dead's advance and save what's left of the living. In that council, the old rules crumbled, and something new, fiercer, wilder, more true, began to form. At the edge of the sea, ships flew banners no one had seen in generations. Targaryen, Stark, Tyrell, and stranger ones still. Some carried bands of bastards, others sons and daughters cast aside by birth, but drawn now to the center of things by fate or fire. The realm, shaken loose from its moorings, began to drift into a new shape. In every port and town, minstrels sang of the smith's son, the wolf girl, the princess who rode dragons, the north that stood while the rest of the world burned. In smoky halls and roadside camps, men and women whispered of a time before bloodlines and betrayal. A time when survival was all, and courage the only coin that counted. In the crypts below the Red Keep, Varys lingered before the tomb of the last Targaryen king. His footsteps stirred dust that had not moved in years. He knelt and placed a hand upon the stone. It is finished, he whispered, to the king who could not answer. Or perhaps it has just begun. He straightened, gathering his cloak. In the gloom behind him, a faint wind stirred. The old world was gone, undone by truths he had loosed on men who had always preferred lies. Now the realm would choose, build anew, or die among the ruins of its own secrets. Varys left the tombs as the first trumpets sounded from the city walls. Ships on the river, dragons overhead, the army of the dead rising in the far north. The wheel was breaking. The dawn, at last, was come. The city's silence shattered just after dawn as the first cries rang out from the towers overlooking Blackwater Bay. The river boiled with sails, some black, some gold, others dragon red or bearing the white direwolf of the north. King's Landing awoke to a cacophony of horns and alarm bells. From the top of Aegon's high hill to the mud-churned alleys of Fleabottom, thousands surged toward windows and doors, craning for a glimpse of what the night's rumors had promised, and the day's fear now made real. Cersei Lannister stood rigid on her balcony. Hands knotted on the stone, watching the city tremble beneath her. In the inner yard, gold cloaks rushed to their posts. Across the courtyards, small folk ran for shelter, pulling children and chests behind them. Somewhere below, Tommen's sobs drifted through the corridors, muffled by thick walls. Qyburn appeared at her elbow, cloak streaked with soot, his eyes bright with a zeal that was almost religious. They come from the river and the road, he murmured. Tyrell banners, Targaryen banners, Stark banners. Some say There are ships from Old Town and Lys as well. No word yet from the Red Wine fleet. Cersei's lips thinned. Send every able knight to the walls. Keep the rest with the boy. Let the city see strength. Tell the High Septon he will preach unity at the steps. Now, before panic can root. Qybrun's smile was thin as a blade. And if unity fails, then let them see the price of treason. Cersei said, voice trembling with cold fire. And let them see who still rules here. The docks at the mouth of the Blackwater roared with noise and motion. Boats jostled for mooring, banners snapping overhead. Olenna Tyrell descended from her carriage, flanked by knights in shining green, Margaery at her side, face calm and composed. Wordless, she nodded to her household. Loras rode ahead, bearing the Tyrell standard. Behind them, the Stark party arrived by river barge. Davos Seaworth at the prow, Lyanna Mormont grim as a carved stone, and the tall cloaked figure of Jon Snow. At his side walked Sansa, her red hair hidden beneath a drab hood. She scanned the wharf, eyes searching for familiar faces. In the crowd she caught a flash of silver hair. Daenerys, not in royal raiment, but wrapped in a plain cloak, Tyrion and Missandei behind her. They converged beneath the battered sign of the Mermaid, a dockside inn commandeered by Brienne and the Blackfish as neutral ground. Brienne waited by the door, sword in hand, and ushered them in quickly. The common room was cramped and smoky, thick with the stench of river mud and fear. Gendry stood by the hearth, arms folded, watching the newcomers warily. Maya Stone nursed a cup of small beer, her eyes sharp and suspicious. Arya sat in the darkest corner, legs drawn up, scanning every movement, her wolf-quick gaze missing nothing. Olenna took the largest chair, waving off servants with a snap. Well, she said, here we are. Queens and wolves, bastards and dragons. A meeting to make the gods laugh and the devils tremble. Magnan. Jon stepped forward. We're here for more than laughter. The city's ready to tear itself apart. The dead are marching from the north, and the realm's lords war over names and blood. Margaery met his eyes. What would you have us do? March on the Red Keep, set ourselves up as rulers by birth or conquest? Daenerys' voice was soft but clear. If we storm the walls, thousands will die. I did not come to King's Landing for slaughter. We must give them a choice. A world remade, or the same old death. Missam. Tyrion tapped his fingers together. Cersei will not yield to words, but the people, perhaps, give them hope. Give them new names to believe in, new banners to follow. If the High Septon will speak for us, if the city's lords see unity, maybe the walls will fall without blood. Lyanna Mormont's voice was iron. And if not, Jon's jaw hardened. Then we fight, but not as before. No one sits alone on the throne. We share it or we break it for good. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the crackle of fire. Olenna nodded, fierce pride shining in her eyes. It is time the realm was ruled by more than one bloody family. Perhaps the bastards and the women will do better than the lords ever did. By midday, the news had run ahead of them, faster than any horse, carried on tongues and in half-remembered songs. Bastards and queens, dragon and wolf, flower and fish, all rumored to be gathered at the Mermaid. Crowds surged through the city, curiosity blurring with fear. Merchants closed their shutters, septons prayed at every crossroads, and children ran through the gutters singing of a new king and queen, a dragon on the throne, a wolf beside him. The lords of the city assembled, wary and divided. Lord Giles Rosby, coughing into his handkerchief. The merchant lord of House Valerian, sleek and shrewd. Even the High Septon himself, ringed by silent sparrows. Kevan Lannister presided, jaw clenched, eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. In the Red Keep, Cersei's fury mounted with each new report. They mean to humiliate me, she spat, pacing the length of the throne room. To parade their half-bloods and up-jump daughters before the mob. They'll find I'm not so easy to unseat. Qybrun's voice was careful. If the lords see unity in your enemies, some may change sides. If you act quickly, an execution, a show of power. She rounded on him. And if I act, I become the villain in every tale they tell. They want me to lash out. I will not give them the pleasure." She took a steadying breath. "Prepare the throne room for petitioners. Let the city see its queen. And send the mountain to the sept. Quiet the high sparrow if he speaks against me." Memoan. At the gates of the city, the stalemate grew brittle. Gold cloaks and Lannister knights manned the barricades, arrows notched, oil boiling above. Across the field, Tyrell banners fluttered. On the river, ships moved into position, their ballistae bristling. The standoff stretched into afternoon, and with every hour, more of the city's folk slipped out to join the crowds gathering beneath the sept steps. In the square, the High Septon raised his arms and called for peace. The seven made all men and women, bastard and lord, queen and merchant. No birth or blood grants you grace, only the deeds of your life. There. His words rippled outward, echoed in alleys and markets. From the docks to the Hill of Rainies, the city listened, hungry for hope and terrified of what might come. At sunset, the delegations moved through the crowd. Jon Snow, Sansa, Daenerys, Margaery, Gendry, Arya, Nia Stone, the Blackfish, Davos, Brienne, and Olenna led their small party to the steps of the Great Sept. They went unarmed save for their banners, a direwolf, a dragon, a rose, and a simple hammer upon a field of blue. The crowd parted, uncertain, as the lords of the city washed from the marble stairs. The High Septon greeted them with a grave nod. "What would you ask of the seven and the city?" he said. Jon spoke first. "The old order is broken. The dead are marching from the north. The realm must stand together or die divided." Daenerys' words followed, sure and calm. "Let all who will fight for the living join us. Let all names be as one. No bastard, no outcast, no queen above the law." Margaery stepped forward, voice ringing clear. "We offer peace, not war. A council of the realm, chosen by all its peoples, not by birth alone." Ishan. Gendry, awkward but resolute, added, "Let every man and woman have the right to choose his fate, not be damned by someone else's name." A hush fell. At the top of the steps, Kevan Lannister exchanged glances with the city's lords. The crowd surged, cries rising. Some for peace, some for vengeance, some for the new council, some for the Dragon Queen or the Wolf King. Cersei watched from a high window, heart thundering with dread and hatred. Qyburn hovered, silent, waiting for her word. As darkness gathered, the council of the city was called. Lords, merchants, commanders, faith leaders. In the Sept's cavernous hall, torches flared and voices rang out, for and against the new order. Accusations flew. Treason, bastardy, old crimes uncovered and new hopes kindled. It was Sansa who quieted them at last, her voice measured, her bearing regal. "We are all children of the realm. Let us end the war of names. Let us judge each by what he does, not where he came from." Her words struck something deep and desperate. One by one the lords agreed. Lord Giles Rosby coughed out his assent. The Valyrian lord nodded, and even Kevan, seeing his numbers dwindle, bowed his head in grim acceptance. The next morning, the city awoke to the banners of peace. The gates opened. The Tyrell host entered without bloodshed. Ships bearing the Targaryen colors moored along the quays. Gendry and Maya, Brienne and Arya, Margaery and Daenerys walked the streets, cheered and jeered in equal measure. In the Red Keep, Cersei withdrew, defeated but not yet broken, her last cards still hidden. In the Great Hall, a new council assembled. Jon Daenerys, Sansa, Margaery, Gendry, Davos, the Blackfish, the High Septon, and others chosen by the city and the great houses. Their first decree, the ending of the laws of bastardy. All men and women would be judged by merit, not blood. Across the city, the news spread. In taverns and alleyways, tears were shed, songs sung, oaths sworn anew. Some resisted, vowing to fight for the old ways. Others, starved for hope, embraced the change. North of the city, as winter deepened, The wall held for one more day. Jon's thoughts drifted off into Ghost, to his brothers lost, to Bran wherever he might be. But for the first time, he believed that when the storm of the dead finally broke, the realm behind him would stand as one, not as a dozen warring families. South of the city, Daenerys and her dragons soared over green fields, her people lining the roads to see her. Arya vanished into the alleys, a blade in the shadows, eyes ever watchful. Maya Stone rode for the Stormlands with new friends, no longer just a bastard but a leader, her name now honored. Gendry opened a new forge, smithing swords for a council that would not call him lesser. The lords met in the open. Plans made not in secret, but beneath the bright banners of peace. And in the cellars of the Red Keep, Varys at last allowed himself a smile, weary and wan. The world he had imagined was being born, bloody, unfinished, uncertain, but new. In the night, he wrote a last letter to the Archmaesters of Old Town. There is no king, no queen, no bastard, only the realm. Let those who would rule it do so by the will of its people, or not at all. He sealed the scroll, sent his last bird, and as the city woke in the light of the new day, Varys melted into the dawn, vanishing from the game he had played for so long. Of King's Landing, as bells rang not for war but for peace, the world turned, and history began again. No longer chained to the lies of the past, but uncertain, hopeful, and fiercely alive. A pale, uncertain dawn bled across the towers of King's Landing, painting the stone in fleeting bands of gold and ash. The city did not celebrate its new peace, not yet. The wounds of years, the bitter taste of secrets and betrayals, would not heal in a single night. But where once there had been only dread, a fragile hush had taken root, a quiet so deep that even the bells seemed reluctant to break it. In the alleyways, scavenging children crept from hiding, blinking at streets washed clean by rain and the passage of foreign banners. Septons lit their morning candles, praying with trembling voices for the Seven to bless what the realm had wrought. In the great hall, the new council gathered beneath the broken swords and faded banners of a dozen houses. Shafts of dusty sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating faces haggard with exhaustion. Jon Snow, his hair still damp from a sleepless night, watched as Daenerys, regal in her simplicity, conferred quietly with Sansa and Margaery. The Blackfish hunched over a map of the city, his brow furrowed in thought. Gendry, plain in smith's leathers despite his new title, stood by the window with Maya Stone, the two of them united in their awkwardness, the weight of their parentage lingering behind every shared glance. The High Septon entered, his white robes dirtied by the crowds he had calmed the night before. He greeted them with a grave nod and addressed the chamber. The city has chosen peace. The faith stands with you, but peace is not the end. It is only the soil in which something new may grow. What shape shall we give it? Daenerys rose, her voice strong. No throne is safe if built on old lies. The laws of bastardy are ended. Nobility comes with duty, not blood. From this day, any who wish to serve may stand for the council, chosen by the people, not by right of birth. They neb Polaman. Margaery, radiant but keen, added, "We will feed the hungry, heal the wounded, open the city to all seeking refuge. Our strength must be the strength of many, not the will of one." Sansa lifted her gaze, cool and clear. The North will stand with the realm, so long as its lords are free to govern their own lands. The old feuds are ashes now. Gendry spoke, rough but sure. Let every trade be honored. Let no one go hungry for one of their father's name. Nen. The words wove through the hall, binding them as much by hope as necessity. Outside, the city began to move again. Market stalls opened. The bells rang for worship. The first laughter in days sounded from the quays. In the Red Keep's highest tower, Cersei Lannister sat alone. Her dress was wrinkled, her eyes rimmed with red, but she refused to call for servants. Tommen slept at last, exhausted by a night of weeping and a morning of futile prayers for his father, for Jaime, for a world that no longer made sense. Cersei stared at the city, her city, and felt only bitterness. Her power, once absolute, had become a mask for her fear. She knew the people would not forgive her, and she could not forgive them their faithlessness. Qyburn entered without knocking, bowing deeply. "Your Grace, the lords have accepted the council's peace. The small folk are being fed. The Tyrells control the granaries, the Starks the gates." Cersei did not turn. "And the faith?" "Preaching reconciliation," Qyburn said. "They have not called for your head." She laughed, soft and broken. "Not yet. But it will come." "Namrinin." Qyburn hesitated, then quietly. "If you wish it, there's a ship waiting. You and Tommen could be in Pentos by nightfall. No one would pursue you." Cersei's jaw tightened. "This is my city. For now," Qyburn murmured. She said nothing more, but as the sun climbed higher, she gathered Tommen and sat beside him in the gloom, running her fingers through his hair. She remembered a time before war, before secrets, before every promise turned to ash. By midday, a long line of citizens wound through the courtyards to the council's dais. Some came to plead for justice, a missing daughter, a murdered husband. Others came to confess old crimes, hoping for pardon in the new world. Most simply, wanted to know if the peace would last. Arya watched from the shadows, slipping among the crowd with practiced ease. She carried messages from the council to the city's corners, gathering whispers of unrest, tracking the few lords who still plotted rebellion. She smiled to herself. She was no lady, no princess, but no one could take from her the pride of being Stark and survivor. In a city of masks, hers was always the truest. At the docks, Gendry worked side by side with the smiths who had once called him nothing but a bastard. He hammered swords and mended plows, his arms marked by the day's labor. Men called him Milord, but he shrugged it off, laughing. "Just Gendry. The only thing noble about me is the work I do." Maya Stone led bands of children into the kitchens, where grain from the Reach was baked into bread. She remembered her mother's words, that justice was as much bread as banners. She stood before the ovens and declared, "No child goes hungry, not while I am here." Rumors began to swirl, of a smith's son offering work to any who asked, of a daughter of the king who patrolled the city at night, of the Dragon Queen walking the markets in plain clothes. These stories carried through taverns and tenements, sparking hope, even as some old lords sneered. At sunset, a great assembly filled the square before the seep tide. Jon Snow stood beside Daenerys, Sansa at his right, Arya and Bran to the left, Margaery and the Blackfish not far behind. The council members took their places. The people pressed close, thousands strong, hungry for words and witness. The High Septon raised his hands. "Westeros has been broken. Now we will mend it. From this day the council will rule, guided by the will of the people. No crown, no single throne. The North is free, but its hand shall be felt here. The laws are changed. No child is lesser for the name they bear." Cheers broke out, ragged, uncertain but growing. Merchants, small folk, even the sworn swords lifted their voices. The council's members spoke one by one, Jon promising to stand against the darkness, Daenerys calling for mercy and justice, Sansa vowing to defend the North and the realm's peace. Arya, voice fierce, offering her sword to any who would keep the faith of the new world. That night, fires burned on every hilltop, signals sent to Winterfell, Highgarden, Sunspear, Pike, and beyond. Messengers rode out, carrying the new decrees. The old rules had fallen, the council would govern, and every man and woman was equal in the eyes of the realm. There were no more bastards, only brothers and sisters born to a world remade. But peace was never simple, and the city did not forget its scars overnight. Some lords plotted in secret, hoping the council would falter. The Gold Cloaks split, half loyal to the council, half to their old masters. Flea Bottom's gang seized on confusion to raid storehouses and manses. And in the south, rumors spread of Euron Greyjoy gathering his fleet, of Old Town's maesters resisting the new order. of exiles and mercenaries hoping to profit from chaos. Daenerys met with Jon and Sansa behind closed doors. "We have made a beginning, but we must be ready. The dead are still coming from the north. The Reach is restless, and the Ironborn will not yield." Jon's face was set. "We hold fast. We send riders to every lord. Stand with us, or stand alone. The time for games is done." Sansa touched his arm. "And if they do not listen?" Arya's voice was cool from the shadows. "Then we remind them why the Starks endured, when so many did not." On Dragonstone, Tyrion counseled Daenerys in the torchlit map room. "It will take years for your laws to take root. There will be plots and rebellions, assassins and spies." Daenerys smiled, tired but unbowed. "We have survived worse. And you will again," Tyrion said. "But remember, the people do not want a queen. They want hope." "Let them have it," she replied. "And if they try to crown me, I will say no." He watched her a moment, understanding in his gaze. "You may be the only ruler in history to refuse the throne, Daenerys Stormborn." She looked to the window, the horizon painted in the red and gold of the setting sun. "If the world must change, let it begin with me." As spring crept north and the snows of winter receded, new banners flew from the towers of the Red Keep. A direwolf, a dragon, a rose, a stag's head, and 100 other devices, each proclaiming that the realm belonged to many, not one. Arya slipped away, her work unfinished. There were names still on her list, but fewer than before. Maya Stone took a place on the city council, the first of her name to do so. Gendry's Forge became a meeting place for men and women seeking honest work. Sansa returned north with Jon and Bran, the North's peace assured by her watchful hand. Daenerys rode her dragon only rarely, trusting more to the council than to fire and blood. In the heart of the city, Varys watched the changes with a kind of melancholy satisfaction. He walked the markets unseen and listened as the people spoke of the new order. He saw old men teaching children their letters in the shade of broken statues, septons tending gardens in abandoned courtyards, knights sharing soup with the poor. He heard laughter where before there had only been fear. He slipped away at dawn, leaving behind a single note for the council. "Let the realm be the king, and the king the servant of the realm." Then he was gone, vanished as quietly as he had worked, content at last to be a shadow, not a hand. So the story passed into legend, of a night when truths were loosed upon the world, and the lies that had chained Westeros for centuries fell away. Some said it was only a dream, that nothing so grand could last. But others remembered the faces of their rulers, bastards and queens, smiths and ladies, the dragon and the wolf, and believed for a little while that something new had truly begun. And in the years to come, when the dead had been driven back and the last old hatreds had faded, it was said that the greatest gift of the new age was not peace or justice or plenty, but the freedom to shape one's own name, to rise or fall by choice indeed, not by the accident of blood. And though the days of dragons and thrones were gone, the tale of that council, and those who sat it, lived on wherever men and women yearned for more than the fate given them. A story of hope and change, and the long, hard work of forging a world from the ruins of lies. Winter's bite softened as spring crept across the land, bringing slow relief to the battered fields surrounding King's Landing. Shoots of green pushed through charred earth where battles had raged. In the city, the scent of smoke lingered, but it was laced now with bread and flowers from the Reach and laughter from children playing in lanes once haunted by fear. Under banners of every house, the markets bustled. Fewer swords hung at belts. The small council's new decrees, scrawled on fresh parchment and nailed to every crossroads, promised rights for the small folk, an end to the branding of bastards, and bread and peace for all who bent the knee to the new realm. The great hall's transformation was slow, but constant. The Iron Throne had been dismantled piece by piece. Its black steel blades melted in Gendry's forge, recast as plowshares and spades, the rest stored for a day of true need. In its place now stood a simple, round table of weirwood and oak, carved by the finest carpenters the North and the Reach could muster. every lord and counselor seated as equal. The walls bore new banners, each sewn from the old direwolf dragon, rose, fish, kraken, sun and spear. At the table, Sansa sat with her head high, her words measured. Margaery's laughter, careful but bright, eased tension after long days. Gendry, awkward among lords but respected, listened more than he spoke. Davos' voice was steady, Brienne's gaze unwavering. Arya's presence felt even when she slipped away on some errand for the council, ghost-like as a rumor. Jon Snow did not often sit the council, though his place was always held for him. He preferred the streets or the training yards, talking with men returned from the wars, watching new recruits drill beside old knights. Sometimes, late at night, he wandered the alleys with Arya, hooded, unnoticed, hearing the city's pulse in the laughter and lamplight, the new hope and the old suspicions that still whispered in dark corners. One such night, Jon paused beside a smithy, watching sparks leap as Gendry hammered a plowshare. Maya Stone worked beside him, sleeves rolled up, sweat beading on her brow. Jon leaned on the doorframe. "You've more to do now than when you were a king's bastard," he said. Gendry grinned, teeth white against the grime. "A king's bastard makes swords for men to kill each other. A free man makes tools so they can live." Maya looked up, eyes shining. "You could stay, Jon. Put down your sword. Teach the city's orphans to fight for themselves." Jon shook his head. "There's a war to the north still. The dead don't care about councils or laws." Gendry's face fell. "Then when it's done?" Jon's answer was a wry smile. "When it's done, I'll build you a hall myself." At the docks, Daenerys walked among the sailors and merchants, unescorted, her hair covered by a simple scarf. Tyrion matched her stride, quiet and watchful. They passed a wagon unloading barrels of reach apples, women hauling nets of herring, children splashing in the shallows. "They look at you and see a queen," Tyrion said. "Even now." She looked down, the hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth. "And I see myself. No crown, no scepter, just another stranger trying to make a place." He stopped, catching her gaze. "You ended the rule of kings and queens. And yet, if you called, thousands would follow you. Is it power you fear?" Daenerys shook her head. "I fear what I might do if I ever believed I alone could save them." They watched as a merchant's boy tumbled from a cart, scattering oranges into the dust. Daenerys knelt to help him gather them, her laughter warm and unguarded. Tyrion thought, not for the first time, that this humility, kindness, the willingness to bend, was the truest power in any land. In the shadow of the Red Keep, Arya met Brienne at dawn, their swords flashing in the mist. Steel rang out, sharp and sure, each feint and parry measured. When they stopped, Arya grinned, breathless. "You're slower than last winter," she teased. Brienne's smile was rare, but real. "Or perhaps you're faster." Arya sheathed needle, wiping sweat from her brow. "There's a ship sailing for Bravos next week." "I might take it." Brienne's brow furrowed. "Will you come back?" Arya shrugged. "Always do. The world's too big for one name. But this is home now. You helped make it so." They clasped hands, warriors and friends, silent and understanding. In the council chamber, Sansa read letters from the north. Grain stores were high, wildlings settling in abandoned villages, the great lords of the Vale and the Neck sending gifts and promises. Bran's Raven spoke of peace in the far north, though his letters were strange, filled with talk of dreams, roots, green sights, and white shadows. She placed the raven's feather beside her on the table. Later, as dusk painted the sky, she met Margaery in the garden, where new buds opened in the warm earth. Margaery knelt beside her, hands sturdy, eyes bright. "You were right," Margaery said. "Change is slow, but it grows." Sansa's smile was gentle. "And it must be tended, or it withers." They worked in silence, side by side. Two queens who would never sit a throne, but ruled with quiet wisdom, weaving peace from the tangled roots of the old world. In the square before the sept, the High Septon gave sermons not of fear, but of redemption. He spoke of names changed, wrongs forgiven, the equal worth of every soul. The small folk listened, hearts raw, some hopeful, some still wary. The council's guards, half in battered livery, half in mismatched armor, kept order not with swords but with gentle words and open hands. A delegation from Old Town arrived, archmaesters and healers, led by Marwyn himself. They met with the council in the Great Hall, debating laws for learning and healing. Davos, rough among scholars, asked the questions that mattered. Will every child learn their letters? Will every sick man see a healer? Marwyn's answer was simple. If the council wills it, and the realm has peace, let it be done. Letters went out, and teachers followed, lanterns in the dark. The city, for the first time in living memory, hummed with lessons at every crossroads. But beyond the walls, not all was quiet. Scouts brought news of Ironborn raids along the western coast. In the Reach, old lords whispered of lost rights, gathering swords behind closed doors. In Dorne, the Sand Snakes sent envoys, beautiful, dangerous women, veiled and silent. They asked for nothing but trade, but everyone knew they watched for weakness. At the Wall, Jon Snow gathered the last of the Night's Watch. Few now, but loyal. Ghost ran at his side, white as winter, silent as moonlight. Wildlings joined their ranks, and a few brave lords sent men, for the dead still stirred beyond the ice. Samwell Tarly arrived with Maester Gilly and their children, hauling books and scrolls from the citadel. Together, they studied the old spells, searching for a way to end the threat forever. In the city, Arya prepared for her journey east, packing a small satchel and slipping through the market in plain dress. She paused by the smithy. Gendry, working late, looked up, wiping sweat from his brow. "Will you be gone long?" he asked. Arya smiled. "As long as it takes to see what's left in the world. But I'll return." Mentrethel. He pressed a steel coin into her hand. A simple token, forged with a wolf and a rose. "In case you forget where you belong." She closed her hand over it. "Never." At the docks, she boarded the ship, pausing at the rail as the city faded behind her. Stone and banners, hope and memory. A promise kept and a future uncertain. As spring ripened, the city began to dream again. New songs were sung in the inns. Of the smith who became a lord, the wolf girl who walked the world, the dragon queen who taught her people mercy, the two queens who planted a garden where a throne once stood. Some scoffed, saying nothing had truly changed. Others remembered the fear, and the hunger, and the knives in the night, and were grateful for even a brief peace. The council met each week, arguing and laughing and quarreling. Gendry built a school beside his forge. Maya taught orphans to read. Margaery opened the first public gardens, feeding the poor with herbs and fruit. Sansa wrote to every corner of the north, inviting lords and small folk alike to council. Brienne and Podrick drilled new guards. Men and women, noble and common, all treated as equals. Davos oversaw the rebuilding of the docks and granaries. Daenerys planted olive trees along the riverbank, helping children carry water in the mornings. She wore no crown, but her presence calmed storms. On a hill above the city, Jon Snow met Bran beneath the ancient heart tree, its red leaves trembling in the breeze. "I dreamed you would come," Bran said. Jon knelt in the grass, listening as his brother spoke of visions, of old ghosts finally laid to rest, of a world rebuilt not by blood or fire, but by stubborn hope. "Will it last?" Jon asked, eyes searching the horizon. Bran only smiled. "No world ever lasts, but this one for a time will be kinder than what came before." Jon stood, feeling the wind, the sun, the pulse of the city at his back. "Then let's live in it, as long as we can." Far to the south, in the shadow of the water gardens, Arianne Martell penned a letter to Sansa Stark. "Dorne remembers, but Dorne welcomes peace. Let the old feuds die. Let trade flourish. Let our children know laughter instead of swords." Namorna. In the west, Yara Greyjoy sent ships filled with grain and salted fish, her message simple. "The sea is free, and so is the realm. Let us keep it so." Even in Old Town, The maesters debated but did not resist. Their healing and learning now offered to every child in the land. So the world turned. Bastards and queens, smiths and lords, wildlings and maesters, all took their place in the council, shaping laws, mending wounds, guiding the realm toward a future both fragile and fierce. Each day brought new quarrels, new questions, but also new joys. Harvests from the new gardens, laughter from the schools, peace between houses long at war. The past was not forgotten. The song still spoke of ice and fire, of dragons and wolves, of a throne forged from swords. But the children who grew in the new spring learned different stories, of gardens and forges, of counsels and choices, of hope's slow, stubborn bloom in the heart of a world remade. And across the land, in every village and hall, there was this: a knowledge that though blood may shape us, it does not bind us, and that the truest power lies not in the name we are given, but in the life we choose to forge. India. Now. The summer that followed was the longest in a generation, the sun's warmth a balm on old scars. King's Landing, once a city of shadows and secrets, grew into a new thing. No longer the seat of a solitary throne, but a living tapestry, shifting and breathing as its people learned to move in the light. Where the Iron Throne had ruled by fear, the Round Table ruled by debate and voice. The air of the council chamber was thick with argument, sometimes petty, sometimes profound, but no longer tinged by dread. The people who gathered there for the first time were not only lords and highborn ladies, but merchants, healers, sailors, and even the odd sellsword, each with a voice that could not be silenced by gold or birth. Sansa's correspondence became legend in the city. Each week, her white ravens flew north and south, east and west, bearing words that braided the realm together, a patchwork quilt of hopes and promises. She had learned from her mother the power of hospitality, from Littlefinger the price of trust, and from the council itself the necessity of listening twice for every time she spoke. In gardens of the Red Keep, now run wild and fragrant, she would walk with Margaery and Asha Greyjoy, their hands trailing through thyme and rose, laughter bright in the morning. Sometimes Arya would appear, silent as the mist, listening with that half-smile that promised mischief. More often she was gone, a rumor in the city's veins. But when she returned, she brought news from distant coasts and riddles from across the narrow sea. On the council, Gendry became the voice of the trades, direct, sometimes crude, but always fair. He rebuilt the city's guilds, not as tools of the powerful, but as places of learning. Apprentices now could rise by skill, not the coin they could slip a master. The greatest gift he gave was not a sword or shield, but 100 plows, sent to the fields still salted by war. When asked why, he shrugged and said, "Steel's for more than killing." Maya Stone ran the orphanages that sprang up like mushrooms after rain. No longer were children sold to brothels or pressed into gangs. Instead, they learned letters, numbers, and trades, cared for by women and men who had once been cast-offs themselves. In Fleabottom, it was whispered that Mistress Stone could find a home for any lost child. She walked the lanes by lantern light, her hair in a plain braid, and not even the meanest rat boy dared steal from her. Daenerys remained a mystery to the city, queen without a crown, living not in the keep but in a house by the river, her dragon circling the sky each dawn. She attended council often, quiet and watchful, never imposing her will. But when she spoke, every ear strained to listen. She spent her days in the city's poorest wards, teaching girls to read and tending the sick. Sometimes children followed her home, trailing after her like ducklings. When the council would ask what she wanted, her answer was always the same: "Let the people decide what they need. I have had enough of rulers who do not listen." Jon Snow was more legend than man. Most believed he had returned to the Wall, though in truth he moved between the north and the city, a bridge between worlds. Ghost was a common sight in the alleys at night, white fur glowing in torchlight, frightening off would-be thieves. Sometimes, Jon met with Arya on the roof of the New Sept, looking out over a city transformed. They spoke of the wildlings, of Bran's letters, full of warnings and portents, and of the old world now lost. They never spoke of thrones, for the word had come to mean only sorrow. The council's greatest test came in the second year, when Old Town's lords and some of the Reach, led by Randall Tarley and a clutch of proud Hightowers, raised their banners in open defiance. They refused to recognize the council, claiming the old laws of inheritance and birth still bound the realm. For a tense fortnight, Westeros held its breath. Ships blockaded the Mander, banners clashed on the field outside Bitterbridge, and emissaries rode day and night between city and countryside. It was Gendry and Davos who turned the tide, riding unannounced into the Tarly camp and demanding parley. Gendry spoke plain. "No one's asking you to kneel. You want to keep your old ways, do it in your own house. But the law in King's Landing is that all are equal. You'd see your fields burn just to keep a bastard in the gutter." Davos told tales of the narrow sea, how storms took ships without regard for birth, how a drowning man's hand was all that mattered. "We survived the dead together," he said, "and we'll survive the living too. But only if we row the same boat." The words worked. Slowly, grudgingly, the lords lowered their banners and sent their sons to the city as pages, not hostages, to learn at the council's knee. When the Hightower's eldest daughter was given a seat at the table, she proved herself sharper than steel, and soon the Reach itself became a model of compromise. The Ironborn, too, came to parley. Yara Greyjoy, her hair threaded with beads and salt, sailed up the Blackwater with half her fleet, and walked unchallenged through the city's gates. "In council," she bellowed, "the sea is no one's to rule, but the Iron Islands will not raid any who trade in good faith." Some scoffed, but most cheered, and soon the Blackwater thronged with ships from every coast. Dorne remained silent but steady. Arianne Martell sent envoys who watched and listened, spoke little, but made common cause with Margaery to bring water and food to the city's poorest. The Dornish olive groves sent oil north, the Red Mountains sent wine, and the Sand Steeds, now famed across Westeros, pulled plows as often as chariots. The greatest shift was in the city itself. Old enemies learned to trade, if not trust. The gangs of Fleabottom, once ruled by knives, now sent champions to the city's games. Wrestlers, runners, swordsmen, all vying for prizes offered by the council. Septons and maesters set up healing tents at every festival, teaching herbs and first aid. For the first time in memory, a woman from the Stepstones became the city's master of coin, chosen for her wit and her fairness. The peace did not come without cost. There were assassins sent from lice and poisonings in Old Town. There were small folk who cursed the council, longing for the strong hand of a king. There were lords who plotted in secret, who vanished into the night when their schemes were uncovered. But the city endured. For each act of violence, 10 acts of kindness followed. For each old hatred, a new friendship bloomed. In the third spring, the White Walkers were finally broken. Jon and the Night's Watch, with wildlings and knights from every house, rode north with the last great host. The battle at the Shadow Tower was sung for years after. Arya herself struck the final blow, needle flashing blue in the dawn, Bran's ravens circling overhead. The dead scattered like smoke on the wind, and in the north, spring burst forth, crocuses blooming where the snow had barely melted. When the host returned, there were no victory parades, but quiet feasts, tears, and laughter. Sansa welcomed her brothers home, Bran riding a white horse, Jon with Ghost at his heels, Arya grinning and battered, bloodied but unbowed. The city marked the day as the new spring festival. Flowers hung from every door, children crowned with wild daisies. The council grew bolder with each season. They rebuilt the libraries, opened schools for girls as well as boys, and sent envoys to Essos to negotiate trade. Maya Stone organized tournaments where orphan boys rode alongside lordlings. Gendry's guilds rebuilt the city's walls and its sewers. Daenerys founded a hospital for the sick, where every healer in the realm was welcome. Even Cersei, exiled but unbroken, wrote letters from Pentos. Warnings, sometimes, but more often cold, cutting advice that Sansa found herself unable to ignore. Tommen grew into a gentle scholar, and one day he returned to the city, not as a king, but as a teacher, speaking softly of history and peace. Brienne trained a new order of knights, the Order of the Lily. sworn to defend the realm, not the crown. Podrick Payne became their first captain, beloved by highborn and smallfolk alike. Years passed. The city changed. Some things did not. The sun still set behind the Red Keep, and the bells still rang out across the bay. The Round Table remained, battered and scarred, a reminder of all that had been risked and won. On a soft summer night, Sansa walked the gardens alone, listening to the hum of the city, the calls of traders at the docks, the laughter from Flea Bottom, the song of a lone bard at the city gates. Jon found her there, his hair streaked with gray, his eyes tired but kind. "Did we do right?" she asked quietly. Jon stood beside her, looking out at the city. A patchwork of banners, torches burning, children chasing fireflies. "We did what we could, and that's enough." They stood together in silence as the moon rose above the city, silver on stone, bright on the water, and in that moment, they knew that the world they had forged, born from secrets and struggle, would live as long as those who remembered, and as long as hope could bloom, even in the heart of a city built on ashes. E.K. The last heat of summer faded into a season of golden afternoons and cool nights, and King's Landing gleamed beneath a sky as blue and clean as a child's first memory. The city's ancient wounds, so slow to heal, were hidden now by the business of living. Lanterns burned at night in the towers and alleys, not for fear, but for celebration. Harvest feasts, marriages, new ships launched, children born to a city unafraid of its own tomorrow. In the mornings, bells rang out for trade and worship, and their peals were a comfort, a song, instead of a summons to war. The Round Table's surface was worn smooth by elbows and fists, by cups and quills, by the press of hands making law. Every morning it came alive with voices, old, young, noble, common, sharp, and sweet. Arguments flared and cooled, but every day something was decided, and always by the will of more than just blood. Sansa presided with the patience of a woman who had seen both kingdoms and cages. Margaery's laughter, wise and bright, coaxed honesty from even the bitterest tongues. Gendry's great hand rested on the wood, strong as a smith's, gentle as a father's. Brienne and Davos, Arya and Maya, and a dozen new names, some as familiar as Tyrell and Martell, others as strange as Waters or Pyle, sat with them, stewards of a realm that dared at last to share its power. Daenerys spent less time in the council, her focus on the city's edges, down by the river, where new houses rose atop old ruins, out in the grain fields where she worked beside the farmers, sleeves rolled and laughter unrestrained. The dragons, grown immense and wise, flew wider circles each season, hunting over Blackwater Rush and the Kingswood, yet always returned to the rookery Daenerys built for them outside the walls, a gift to the city, a promise that monsters could be tamed, and that the wild had its place in peace. Jon Snow, still the city's living legend, passed through its gates in every season. North with the wildlings at the edge of haunted woods, south to the sea, where Arya's ships came and went with strange silks and stories, east to the council when called. He bore the marks of battles past, scars across his arms, white in his hair. But there was a stillness to him, a contentment that surprised even those who had loved him longest. He found comfort in simple things, a sparring match with Podrick Payne, a quiet cup of wine with Sam Gilly, an evening spent listening to the city's minstrels on the stone steps outside Gendry's forge. Each council member, in their way, became the heart of a different quarter of the city. Margaery's gardens made the old Red Keep green with roses and grapes, open to children and the sick and the aged. Gendry's guilds rebuilt the docks, giving work to every hand willing to labor. Maya Stone's orphanages grew into houses of learning, where girls learned sword and sons beside boys, where even the poorest child could dream of counsel or command. Arya came and went, sometimes a whisper, sometimes a storm. She was seen at Sansa's side in times of crisis, at Brienne's in times of threat, and often enough in the market's busiest hour, passing news and gathering stories. No one forgot Daenerys' promise to the lowest of the low. She walked the gutters and the hill of Rhaenys, sat with the dyers and the cut-purses, shared their food and their tales. Her name became a song in 100 tongues, her laughter echoing from Flea Bottom to the Queen's Gardens. Some said she was the city's truest ruler, not by law or title, but by 1,000 daily kindnesses. In the shadow of peace, the city did not forget its past. Each year at the New Spring Festival, the council walked barefoot through the city, from the river to the sept, and the people threw petals, not stones. At the festival's height, the council's children, bastard and true-born, lord's son and market girl, lit lanterns for the dead. Their prayers were not for war, but for the wisdom to keep peace, and to honor those who had died, making it possible. On the 10th festival, when the city's towers bloomed with banners, Arya returned from the east with a fleet of ships, sails striped red and gold, blue and silver. She brought back not just spices and coins but words, stories of lands where kings had never ruled, where councils were chosen by lot, where the name, bastard, held no shame. She spoke in the council, urging them to learn from the world beyond Westeros. Brienne, older and honored, welcomed Arya with a spar that left both bruised and beaming. Gendry feasted her in the Guildhall, while Sansa and Margaery wept and laughed in the gardens. Daenerys, regal and weary, greeted her on the riverbank, embracing her as kin. Even Jon, come down from the north with Ghost and a new band of wildlings, allowed himself a rare and quiet smile. As the years passed, new crises rose: plagues, poor harvests, storms that battered the coast, lords in far reaches who longed for the old days of crowns and iron. Each was met by debate, and sometimes by bitter dispute, but the council held. Gendry's voice was as likely to sway them as Margaery's wit or Arya's cold truth. Sansa's patience anchored them, and Daenerys' example reminded them that justice could be both soft and strong. There were tragedies as well as triumphs. When a fire swept the docks, Daenerys flew to the rescue, her dragons raining water drawn from the Blackwater. When a fever swept through the orphanages, Gilly and Sam led the healers, Maya never leaving the bedsides until every child who could recover was safe. When a madman from the east plotted to seize the city, Arya found and ended him in the tunnels beneath the Hill of Baelor. Brienne, wounded in her defense of the council, was nursed to health by Podrick and Margaery, and the city mourned and celebrated her together. As the council's power deepened, so too did its reach. Maesters and wise women from every corner of the realm sat at the table. The north sent ravens in tribute, the Riverlands sent wheat and fish. The Iron Islands became known for trade, not raids. Dorne sent spices, and sometimes songs. Their envoys welcomed in every hall. For the first time in living memory, the city's laws were spoken in a dozen tongues. Children from every house and nuns studied together in great halls, built where old manors had fallen. No one starved, no one feared for their name, and every festival brought new tales, new faces, new songs. Even the old enemies of the realm found new places in its story. Randall Tarley, once the fiercest voice for the Old Order, became Master of Horse, his pride softened by years of peace. Yara Greyjoy led the city's fleet, her laughter booming from every tavern. Tommen, the gentle king, became a scholar, his books guiding the city's justice and mercy. It was not a perfect realm. There were always those who whispered of lost glory, who schemed for more than their share. But the council met each challenge, slow and imperfect and human, and the city stood. On a spring morning like any other, Jon and Sansa walked the city walls. Below, the round table gleamed in the sun, its surface worn but unbroken. "Do you regret it?" Sansa asked. "No kings, no thrones, only the long work of listening and building and hope." Jon rested his hand on the stone, watching the city's life pulse below. "Sometimes I miss the quiet of the north, but not the loneliness, not the cold. Here, even with all our faults, there's a warmth. We're not just surviving, we're living." Sansa smiled. "And if the world turns again?" Jon's eyes found hers. "Then we hold fast. And when we fall, someone else will rise. That's what we built. A world where anyone can stand at the table, no matter their name." And beneath the banners, as the city's bells sang out, and the lanterns of the New Spring Festival glimmered like stars, the council gathered once more. Not to crown a king, but to shape a realm, imperfect and ever-changing, built by the hands and hopes of all its children. Ngagaidi, Indicharodbo, and Rubi. Spring melted into high summer, and with the sun's ascent the city's colors grew bolder. The towers of King's Landing glowed with fresh paint and banners, the rooftops stitched together in reds and blues, and the new green and white of Marjorie's gardens. The river was busy with barges ferrying fruit from the Reach, timber from the Stormlands, and sand-laden dramans out of Dorne. At dawn, the council's round table filled with new faces. Craftsmen from Gulltown, a Lysine merchant, a giant from Skagos whose low voice held the chamber wrapped when he bothered to speak at all. Children ran in packs beneath the city's walls, racing their shadows, unafraid. Sansa found herself surprised by contentment. She remembered other summers, ones of tension and hunger, when bells rang for executions or funerals, when the sky above the Red Keep was choked with black smoke. She never truly let herself believe the peace would last. But with each morning, she measured the lengthening days and found, almost to her disbelief, that they seemed to stretch without end. Each dawn, she broke bread with Marjorie among the roses, writing letters to the north and to Dorne. She saw the small folk in the gardens, baskets heavy, children learning their letters beneath a carved weirwood pole that had once marked a gallows. Sometimes she strolled the streets with Arya, sometimes alone, a plain cloak over her hair, listening to laughter in the city's corners, to the shouts of peddlers and the distant clangor from Gendry's forge. Gendry's smithy had become a crossroads for all. Guildsmen seeking his word on disputes, sailors bartering new alloys, and even foreign dignitaries hoping for a blade or plow stamped with his sigil, the crowned anvil. He never seemed quite at ease among the rich or powerful, but he had learned to laugh off their pride, and if he couldn't, to outdrink them in the green-lanterned tavern at the riverbend. Maya Stone was always near, her voice growing surer each day as she managed the city's apprentices and the great food stores that fed the poorest quarters. The two of them became symbols for the kind of merit Sansa and the council championed. Gendry, who was never more than himself, and Maya, who belonged to every child who had ever known the gutter. The peace was tested, as all peace must be. Word reached the Council of Lords in the West, who plotted with Lys, angry that their sons no longer inherited titles simply by birth. A handful of young knights took to the roads as bandits, styling themselves the Order of the Lion's Pride, preying on travelers between the Gold Road and Lannisport. There were whispers of old Targaryen loyalists gathering in the ruins of Summerhall, and pirates from the Stepstones struck at Dorne's southern coast. Even in King's Landing, the old resentment surfaced now and then, in sneers at a bastard's new cloak, or the broken window of a councilman's home. Brienne rode out at the head of the Lily Guard, shining in new forged steel, Podrick Payne riding close at her side. She brought justice with a firm hand and a patient word, breaking up the Lion's Pride without drawing a sword, taking their leaders into the city to answer for their crimes before the council. Arya was gone in the night, slipping through Summerhall stones to find the loyalists, returning with proof of their plans and their ringleader's ring. No need for blood, only the quiet, inescapable justice that was now her signature. The council debated endlessly. Some wanted old laws restored. Others, emboldened by peace, called for more. For new schools, a standing fleet. For coin minted with the council's round table in place of the dead dragon or stag. Gendry supported the mint, laughing as he hammered out the first die. Marjorie supported the schools, as did Daenerys, who taught a lesson every week to a class of orphans near the river. Sansa's patience kept the arguments from turning bitter. Jon, when he attended, said little, but his presence was enough to quell the loudest voices. In the north, the land was also changing. Bran's letters arrived regularly, written in an odd, poetic hand. "The trees remember when there were no kings," one said. "You have done well to listen." Sansa smiled at these and sent him news of the city, of the new laws, the children in their schools, Arya's comings and goings. Sometimes on summer nights, she would climb to the highest tower and watch for ravens, her eyes wandering north over forests and rivers, her heart at peace in both city and home. Daenerys, at home in her riverside house, grew quieter with the years. She spent mornings among the market women, afternoons walking the riverbank with her dragons gliding overhead. She spoke little at council, but never missed a session when justice or mercy was on the table. Children adored her. Street singers wrote her into their songs. Tyrion, now older and walking with a silver-tipped cane, still visited from time to time, sharing counsel and wine, and keeping the city's books in better order than any maester. The city's festivals became famous. At the new spring festival, every child was given a lantern and a loaf, and the city glowed brighter than any lord's feast. The games in the fields beyond the city were a true gathering of the realm. Archers from the north, wrestlers from the Reach, dancers from Dorne, and singers from the Iron Islands. With the Lily Guard as judges and Arya always among the crowd, her laughter infectious. The dragon flights that marked the festival's end drew people from as far as Bravos and the free cities. Not all change was easy. There were years of drought when the rivers shrank and tempers grew short. In those summers, Daenerys and Gendry organized caravans to bring water from the west, while Maya's stores kept the children from hunger. There was a fever that swept the docks, and Gilly led the healers, her knowledge from Old Town saving hundreds. Twice, the council met in crisis, the doors barred, arguments raging late into the night. Each time, compromise won, not from fear or force, but from the stubborn will of those who remembered the city as it once was. Jon returned with the autumn winds, riding down from the north with Ghost and a dozen wildlings. He brought news of peace beyond the wall, of wildlings settling new towns, of Bran's magic keeping the shadows at bay. He sat the council for a season, then left again, drawn by restlessness, by the memory of old ghosts. Sansa missed him, but understood. Some wolves were never meant to linger in gardens. In the 7th summer, the city received a delegation from the free cities. Magisters and merchant princes come to see this realm of no kings, no bastards, and council rule. Sansa hosted them in the gardens. Margaery led them through the city schools. Gendry showed them the mint and the forges. The magisters left with gifts, coin, grain, new contracts, and with stories that would travel east. Tales of a land where the past had been put to rest and the future built by many hands. As the days shortened, a quiet spread across the city. The bells rang softer. The river's waters grew still and dark. At the year's last council, the table was crowded. Brienne and Podrick, Gendry and Maya, Arya in a cloak of foreign make, Daenerys with her hair woven in a silver braid. Sansa spoke of what was won and what must be protected, of the need for patience and vigilance. Margaery spoke of new gardens planted, Arya of dangers lurking beyond the city. Gendry spoke of the new mint, Maya of children who now grew up strong and unafraid. Jon quiet said only, "You have built something that will outlast all of us. But do not let it rest. Change must be tended or it rots." When the meeting ended, the council walked out together, into the lantern-lit gardens. The people had gathered, singing and laughing, carrying lanterns down to the river. In that golden dusk, the children of the council, bastards, true-born orphans, lords' daughters, and stable boys, lugged the lanterns onto the water, each light a promise against the dark. Above, dragons circled, their wings catching the last light. In the crowd, Arya squeezed Sansa's hand. Margaery knelt to lift a child onto her shoulders. Brienne smiled, her armor glowing gold. Gendry watched the water, Maya beside him, her head on his shoulder. Daenerys stood with the people, laughter on her lips, and Jon, somewhere at the edge of the crowd, watched it all, silent and proud. The city glimmered beneath the summer stars, and in that light, it was possible to believe that a better world could be made, not by the sword or by birth, but by the courage to imagine it, and the will to build it, night after night, lantern by lantern, year after year, together. Mekai. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 940 on CD 98, 98 till 714 Bine. Yan. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 940 on 23 B79, 30 cents. 70 B9. Isha. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 941 6B7N13. 711 9. Can Dishihai. Kau Bistante. Horror. Buya Disru Kapatar. Winter returned, gentle and slow, dusting the city's eaves with frost and breathing white across the fields beyond the gates. In King's Landing, braziers burned in every square, and the scent of pine smoke drifted through alleys where snowballs replaced old cobblestone battles. The small folk, hardened by leaner times, took the cold in stride, fashioning mittens from scraps, wrapping their children in second-hand furs. Each night, the lanterns glowed like a second sky, and the round table's light shone all the brighter within the great hall. The council convened more often in winter. As the city pressed close for warmth, Sansa presided in her blue wool cloak, hair braided in the northern style, cheeks red from the chill. Margaery arrived daily in velvet, her gardens sleeping under straw, but her mind abloom with plans for spring. Gendry stamped snow from his boots and thawed his hands at the hearth before laying out the winter's work. Repairs to the aqueducts, new stoves for the orphanages, stronger walls at the river's edge. Brienne Podrick rotated the Lily Guard at every watch, their disciplined patience bringing peace where the wind might have stirred unrest. Arya was less seen in winter, though her presence was never doubted. She became a story again, whispers of her on the wall with Jon and Ghost, then in the narrow lanes at midnight, teaching a girl to turn a knife or warning a baker's son away from a crooked dice game. She left small tokens, dried wildflowers, a copper penny, a wolf's tooth, at the bedsides of children who had no one else. And so Fleabottom grew rich in secret pride. When she appeared at council, she was sharper than the cold, and her news cut through rumor like a knife through silk. Daenerys dragons nested atop the old Sep's bones, smoke trailing from their nostrils in the cold air. But the city had ceased to fear them. Children played in their shadow, inventing tales of fire and flight. Daenerys herself worked among the sick, her hands warm, her words gentle. She brought casks of southern wine to the healers, sitting with them through the long dark nights and reminding them that spring always follows. Jon rode the wall in the north, returning in early frost with a retinue of wildlings and Northmen. He came at Maya's urging. Stores in the north were full, the peace held, and there was time now for him to visit the city that bore his hope. He met Gendry at the smithy, laughing over cups of mulled wine. He watched Arya spar with Brienne, pride in his eyes. He walked the gardens with Sansa, silent and content. He never stayed long. There was too much of the wolf in him, restless for snow and wild wind. But every visit left the council steadier and the city braver. One winter night, as the snow fell thick, the council hall filled for the midwinter assembly. The fire roared in the great hearth, casting a flickering red across the round table and its gathering. Sansa called the meeting to order, her voice clear as ice. "We meet to ensure none are forgotten in the cold. Gendry, are the forges running? Are the city's braziers enough?" Gendry nodded. "Every forge and oven in King's Landing has been kept hot since the first frost. The guildsmen have set up soup kitchens at each gate." Maya added, "We've sent extra blankets and flour to the poorest districts. If the snow deepens, the orphans will come to the old Septa. There is room for them." Members of their Horksauce. Brienne reported no unrest, only gratitude. Margaery shared plans to distribute dried fruit from the Reach and seeds for spring gardens. Davos spoke of harbor ice and the need for more salt to keep the roads passable. Arya, appearing as if conjured by the wind, laid a bag of copper on the table. "From the gaming dens. They won't be missed." Daenerys, quiet until then, spoke. "Let's open the river baths for the sick. Boil water, use the southern herbs. It will do more good than another blanket." "No." The council agreed. Tyrion, old and cheerful, marked the ledgers. "We have coin and stores to last until Green returns. Let's not grow soft. Hunger and cold are enemies, but old habits are harder still." The session ended with a toast. Ale for some, hot spiced wine for others. No one left until the last log burned down, and Sansa watched each face as they filed into the snowy dark. She knew them all, each strength and flaw, each stubborn hope. This was the city's secret now, the strength of many, not one. The winter festivals began at solstice. No longer were there tournaments or feasts for lords alone. Instead, the city gathered in the lantern-lit squares, sharing stories and songs, warming hands over braziers and mugs of cider. The Lily Guard patrolled in plain cloaks, their swords sheathed. Arya staged midnight games for the children, maze races and riddles, stories of distant lands, a lesson for every night. Maya and Gilly led the orphans in a lantern parade down the riverbank, their laughter echoing under the walls. Daenerys and Sansa walked the market together, buying honey cakes and fresh nuts, watching the baker's sons and merchant daughters haggle in a dozen tongues. "I never believed this was possible," Daenerys said, her eyes shining in the firelight. "A city where dragons and orphans share a meal." Sansa smiled. "We made it so. It took every one of us." When the first deep snow blanketed the city, the children built great beasts. Wolves, stags, and a towering dragon with stones for eyes. Daenerys watched them from her garden and smiled as her dragons circled above, careful in their play. Still, winter brought new challenges. Pirates raided the Dornish coast, their ships turned back only by Yara Greyjoy's fleet and timely warning from Arya's friends abroad. An illness swept the river quarter, but the healers and maesters, working together, stopped its spread. In the west, a drought threatened the grain harvest, and the council sent ships of bread and salted fish. Sansa's letters urging unity and promising help without judgment. In the north, Bran wrote of quiet and dreams, of wolves running through white woods, of children's laughter echoing in the snow, of old spirits satisfied and new ones yet to rise. Sansa cherished his letters, reading them by candlelight when sleep would not come. On the coldest night of the year, the council met in the old godswood, beneath branches heavy with snow and ice. Lanterns hung from every bough, casting red light on white bark. Each counselor placed an offering at the heart tree. Bread, salt, a copper, a feather, a scrap of silk, a branch of wild rose. They stood in silence, feeling the weight of what had come before and what they must yet build. Gendry spoke first. "I was born with nothing. Every day I wonder if I deserve this, any of it. But I won't give it up, not for myself, but for the city." Maya's voice was steady. "We give what we can, and that's enough." Arya looked at Sansa and nodded. "We keep each other safe. Always." Brienne rested her hand on Podrick's shoulder. "We serve. That's all a knight is." Jon, voice rough, added, "We fight for the living. The rest is dust." "Ban." Daenerys closed her eyes, whispering words in Valyrian for lost friends and old wounds. Sansa finished the circle, her breath visible in the frozen air. "We remember. And we hope." Afterward they stood together as the city's bells rang out, their music bright against the night. In the darkness beyond the walls, wildlings sang in their camps. Across the water, ships answered with horn. Lanterns drifted down the river, carrying wishes for spring. When the thaw came, the council met to plan the year ahead. Sansa outlined new laws for apprentices and trade. Marjorie presented plans for fresh gardens. Gendry began drawing the next mint dyes. Daenerys organized a fleet of riverboats for trade with the free cities. Arya returned from a long journey with news of peace in the east. Jon promised to keep the roads safe north of the Neck. For every quarrel, there was laughter. For every doubt, a stubborn hope. Children born that winter never knew fear, only the certainty of warmth and the promise of food. The round table, battered and burnished, bore witness to every word and every dream. And when the first true green broke through the city's thawing gardens, Sansa climbed the wall above the Red Keep and looked out over a city remade. Banners snapped in the new wind, bells called the people to the markets, and somewhere below, dragons wheeled across a sky as blue and wild as hope itself. A city that had learned at last how to rule itself, and how to live, not by the sword, nor the name, but by the quiet shared will of all its people. alive, together, and unafraid of whatever future the world might bring. Jiao, unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 941. 930B. Sict. 711 Ban Hai. Oh, ah. With winter fading into a radiant, rain-washed spring, King's Landing emerged from its long hush, like a city waking from a long and necessary dream. Buds burst green on the boughs of the Queen's gardens. The last drifts of snow vanished from gutters, and the Blackwater's watermen sang again at their oars as their boats glided through the mist. Laughter carried on the air, children's games in the ruined sept yards, the bold jests of street sellers hawking hot bread, the exultant shouts of those chosen for the city's new apprenticeships. The city felt as if it were being rewritten from the ground up, each moment a word, each kindness a line. Inside the great hall, the council's round table gleamed beneath shafts of early sunlight. The scent of ink and beeswax drifted from scattered parchments. Sansa sat at the head, pale hair loose about her shoulders, listening as Marjorie described the first blooms in the Queen's new wildflower glen. Gendry, face smudged with soot, spoke of how the spring meltwater could power the new mills he and the guildsmen had begun. Davos, his beard tinged with gray, updated them on ships plying the narrow sea and the fresh olive oil arriving from Dorne. On this morning, a hush fell as Arya entered, wind-blown, sun-browned, fresh from the docks. She wore a new tunic of green and brown, gifts from Essos, and in her eyes was a hint of challenge. She set a weathered pouch before the council and spilled out silver coins, glass beads, and a curling map drawn in a language none but Tyrion could decipher. The room hushed as she told of her latest journey, sailing from Old Town to Pentos, trading in the free cities, learning from towns where law and custom shifted like the sea. "The world is bigger than we know," Arya said, "and it is watching us. I heard our story in every port, a city ruled by council, a realm where even a blacksmith's son can lead, and no child is called bastard. They do not believe it's possible. They do not believe it will last. I told them it's only the beginning." Gendry's grin was wide as spring itself. "Let them come see for themselves. I'll put them to work on the docks." "Many roll." Sansa smiled. "The world will believe what we show it. Let them see peace and justice and a place at the table for all." Marjorie's laughter rang. "And if they bring trouble, we have Arya." Arya's smile was quick as a blade. "Let them bring their best." That morning, they debated new apprenticeships, new embassies, a contest of poetry and sport open to every city on the narrow sea. Brienne, who had just returned from the Riverlands, was named Master of the City Watch, her appointment cheered by small folk and lords alike. Maya Stone's proposal to open the city's archives to all children was passed, and she set about gathering scribes from every corner. Gilly began lessons in the lower city, teaching letters and numbers alongside healers, her son standing shyly at her side. As the days lengthened, Sansa and Marjorie walked the city's lanes in plain dress, buying bread and seed, pausing to listen to disputes or laughter. They visited the guild halls, the gardens, the new mint where Gendry hammered out the first coins of the spring, round as the table, bearing the lily of the city and the sheaf of the north. The council became a place of stories, children reciting lines they'd learned at school, foreign sailors bringing news from Myr or Lys. Each meeting brought a small celebration, a taste of food from the farthest farm, or a song from the newest apprentice. Even the old lords, some now gray and slower in speech, were drawn into the city's warmth. No longer feared, they were honored as elders, keepers of wisdom and memory. Jon Snow, when he came south, found the city changed. He walked the streets with Ghost at his side, pausing in the new market squares to watch children tumble and merchants barter in every accent. He shared meals in Sansa's kitchen, sparred with Brienne in the new yards, and sat in the Godswood at dusk, silent but smiling as ravens wheeled overhead. Daenerys, her hair grown long in silver, tended her dragons and her gardens. In spring she traveled the river, bringing food and aid to towns recovering from war. When council met, her voice was gentle but strong, her knowledge of far places unmatched. She never raised her voice, but none failed to listen when she spoke. This new city had no need for a king's justice, but justice all the same was done. When disputes rose, the council heard them. When a crime was committed, judgment came swiftly, but with mercy. Sometimes, those who erred were sent to work in the gardens or kitchens, or to learn a trade beside Gendry. Few ever erred twice. Twice in spring, alarms rang from the western walls. Bandits from the riverlands, hungry after a hard winter, slipped into the city. The Lily Guard, led by Brienne and Podrick, met them in the streets, not with swords, but with food and the offer of work. Most took it. Those who did not were given a choice: exile or service. Even Arya, watching from the shadows, could find no fault with such mercy. In Flea Bottom, lanterns burned every night. Maya Stone and her band of orphans staged plays, stories of old knights and queens, but always ending in hope and laughter. Daenerys visited them often, bringing apples and sweets. Sometimes she read to them, sometimes she simply listened, and when she left, the children trailed after her like ducklings. The festivals that year were more splendid than any before. At the midsummer, Gendry and Margaery led a procession through the city. Apprentices in white and green, bakers throwing loaves from carts, musicians playing in every square. Sansa rode at the head, her cloak embroidered with the crests of every house and nunn, her face radiant and unguarded. Arya, impossible to find when searched for, appeared on rooftops and at the city gates, her laughter rolling across the crowds. Daenerys' dragons flew at dusk, painting the sky with fire and light, their shadows racing across the city's towers. In the night, children set lanterns on the river, each one a promise of peace kept, of dreams yet to come. The council met under starlight that evening. Jon stood with his hand on Ghost's flank. Brienne's sword gleamed in the torchlight. Margaery's hair shone gold. Sansa listened to the city's song, her heart full with pride and hope. As spring gave way to the first heat of summer, the city faced its old enemies again. Fire in the docks, fever in the poor quarters, a merchant's quarrel with foreign sailors. Each crisis was met not with panic, but with swift action. Brienne's guards quenching the blaze, Gilly and the healers containing the fever, Arya and the city's new magisters brokering peace at the harbor. Each time the council met in the hall, argued and compromised, and emerged the stronger. When news came of troubles in the north, wildlings fighting over pasture, river lords bickering over tolls, Sansa sent envoys, Gendry sent tools, and Daenerys herself went to parley, riding north at Jon's side. There was no longer fear that the city would fall without a king. There was only the sure knowledge that its people, each in their way, would stand for it. The greatest change, and the most quiet, was in the city's children. They learned to read and write, to count and measure, to plant and build. They carried the tales of the old world, the broken throne, the wars and betrayals, but also the new songs of the Round Table, of Maya Stones, orphans, of Arya's travels, of Gendry's forge and Daenerys' gardens. They looked to the future with a certainty unknown before, and their games were not of kings and queens, but of counselors and healers, dragons and wolves, peace and plenty. The city's story spread to the world, and with it, hope. Envoys from Braavos and Norvos came to study its council. Letters arrived from the Summer Isles and from Volantis, asking for teachers, for counselors, for seed and advice. The world, skeptical at first, now watched with hungry eyes. On a late spring night, Sansa stood atop the city walls, watching the lanterns drifting downriver, the wind sweet with promise. Arya stood beside her, arms folded, eyes shining. "Do you think it will last?" Arya asked softly. Sansa's voice was quiet but sure. "Not forever. Nothing ever does, but long enough for another generation to believe it's possible, long enough for hope to root." Arya smiled. "That's all we can do." Below them, laughter rang out. A child's song rose over the rooftops, and the dragons soared across the moon, their wings shadow and silver in the night. The city endured, not by decree or blood, but by the hands and hopes of all its people, working together, building, mending, forgiving and daring in each new dawn to begin again. The world outside King's Landing never quite paused, not even in the age of counsel and hope. Spring's gold ripened to summer green, and the city pressed on, thriving as it had never done under the rule of any single king. On the high roads and riverways, traders and pilgrims poured in, Septons seeking to bait, Tiroshi sailors after new contracts, farmers from the Vale toting carts heavy with cheese and barley. By midsummer, the city bustled with more than twice its usual number. Inns overflowed, temples rang with strange prayers, and every fountain square resounded with laughter and bargains. Even the shadows were different now, less like things to be feared, more like quiet places in which children dreamed. At the round table, the business of peace became the business of prosperity. Sansa's hand glided from parchment to parchment, her voice as steady as the tide as she shepherded disputes between lords and commoners, between the guilds and the healers, between north and south, even between old rivals within the council itself. Margaery's wit untangled the thorniest arguments, her own gardens blossoming into living classrooms for the city's children, who learned the names of every herb and bird, the trick of grafting roses or coaxing beans from barren soil. Gendry spent less time at the forge, more with the growing guild, now a true city institution, hiring women as masters for the first time, holding contests in ironwork, rewarding those who fashioned not the sharpest sword, but the plow that cut the deepest, the lock most cunningly made. With Mia Stone at his side, he moved through the city, quiet and broad-shouldered, lending his strength to those who once would have crossed the street to avoid him. Maya's orphan houses became schools in their own right, each run by those she'd raised, boys and girls who knew hunger and fear, now reading, running, and laughing at her heels. The council's law was simple but firm. Let every person who would serve the city serve it. Let none be named bastard. Let none be shamed for birth. The old tongue was slow to die. Still, in the alleyways and at the docks, there were fights, old insults flung. But the city itself moved forward, and with each passing month, more and more small folk believed the law was not just words, but the very stones underfoot. Brienne, master of the Lilyguard, established a new tradition. At each festival, any child could come to the square before the old Red Keep and train with her, Podrick, and the other knights. Wooden swords flashed, and bucklers rang. Laughter and shouts echoed off the walls where once only the screams of battle had sounded. Arya watched, sometimes joining in, sometimes vanishing for weeks, only to reappear with news from some border town or far-flung village where the council's reach was being tested. Daenerys had made herself almost ordinary, if such a thing was possible. Her dragons hunted farther each year, yet always returned, circling low over the river at dusk, shadow and fire in the twilight. She lived in a simple riverside house, tending gardens, helping the healers, walking the city with her hair unbound, and a warm word for any who greeted her. She spoke rarely in council, but when she did, all listened. Her advice was always practical, her vision unwavering. This summer brought the arrival of envoys from far-off Korth and the Summer Isles. They came, curious, to see a city ruled not by iron or gold, but by the soft power of patience and the slow growing of trust. Sansa, Margaery, and Gendry welcomed them in the shade of the council gardens, offering plates of fruit and cold wine, inviting them to sit at the round table. The envoys asked 1,000 questions. How were the children taught? Who chose the council? What happened when the councilors quarreled? "We do quarrel," Sansa said, her smile sly. "That is the heart of it. Every voice is heard, every concern weighed. We compromise, and we keep going." "Banner, who rules in the end?" pressed a magister from Qarth. "We all do," Margaery answered. "Or none. The realm is not a crown. It is the soil and the water, the walls and the songs, the laughter of its people." The envoys watched as Arya, barefoot, ran races with the orphans in the lane, as Daenerys braided the hair of a crying child, as Brienne demonstrated sword forms, careful and gentle as any mother. They sent reports back to their homes, filled with stories of justice by counsel, peace by custom, and the wild promise of a city that ruled itself. trouble did not vanish from the world. In the far north, wildlings bickered over land, and Jon Snow mediated with the slow, sure patience he'd learned from Sansa. On the Stepstones, pirates tested the reach of Yara Greyjoy's fleet, but she met them with fire and wit, and soon the coasts were safe again. In the Reach, old Tarly men still grumbled about law and blood. But with each harvest, more and more of their sons and daughters came to King's Landing, eager to see the Round Table for themselves. The greatest threat that year came not from swords, but from sickness. A fever swept in from Old Town, borne by ships that had not cleaned their holds. For days fears stirred. The sick gathered in the lower city. Healers worked night and day. The bells rang warnings and families locked themselves away. Gilly led the healers. Daenerys, Maya, and Gendry worked in the soup kitchens. Arya organized the orphans to bring food and water to those too weak to come for it themselves. It was Sansa who ordered the city gates closed, not to keep out the world, but to keep hope inside. The council agreed, and for 10 days, King's Landing sealed itself, relying on its own strength. They treated the sick, burned the infected straw, and listened to every healer's advice. Margaery distributed dried rose petals to sweeten the air in sick rooms. Daenerys sent messages to every house, encouraging patience, and Arya left small gifts at every healer's door. At the fever's height, Brienne patrolled the streets with Podrick and the Lily Guard, keeping order with a word, never a blade. When the sickness broke at last, the city mourned its dead, but there was no rioting, no burning, no chaos. For the first time in living memory, a calamity had not led to war. When the gates reopened, a great feast was held in the river gardens. Every citizen was welcome. There was no distinction by blood or trade or faith. The bells rang, and lanterns floated down the black water, each carrying a prayer for the lost and a promise for the future. Gendry and Arya competed in a foot race. Margaery danced with Sansa. Brienne and Daenerys shared bread with the humblest fishmonger. The envoys from Qarth and the Summer Isles watched, silent and amazed, and sent home word that King's Landing had done what no city in their world had managed, met fear with courage and sorrow with unity. As summer waned, council turned to the harvest, rick, golden, and heavy on the vine. Grain from the riverlands, olives and wine from Dorne, wool from the north, and lumber from the western valleys, all filled the city's markets. Sansa decreed that a portion of every shipment was to be set aside for leaner times, and the council agreed. Daenerys' dragons returned from a long hunt, and she climbed onto the city wall to watch them wheel against the sunset, the light glimmering off their scales. "They're not tame," she told Arya, who stood beside her, "but they are home. That's all any of us can hope for." Arya nodded, watching the city bustle below. "You did it," she said, quiet as falling dusk. "We all did." Jon Snow arrived for the autumn council, his hair streaked with gray, his eyes full of the far north. He brought gifts, baskets of cloudberries, furs for the orphans, tales of white wolves running in the wild. He sat at the round table, laughed at Gendry's jests, and listened as the city's children recited the laws they had learned. He stayed for a month, then left again, content in the knowledge that his home, like his family, was strong and thriving. At year's end, the council gathered in the Godswood, lanterns swinging in the branches. The table moved beneath the red leaves. They spoke of what had been built, of the challenges ahead, of the children born that year, who would never know what it was to be shamed for their parentage or their dreams. Maya Stone, holding a sleepy orphan in her arms, spoke for them all. "This is not a perfect city, but it is a better one." Sansa looked around, at Margaery's brightness, Gendry's strength, Arya's wild freedom, Daenerys' quiet wisdom, Brian's steady loyalty, Jon's distant courage. "It's ours," she said. "All of ours." As the lanterns floated up, carried by hope and a soft wind, the council joined the city below, meeting their people as equals. No thrones, no crowns, only the bond of hard work, forgiveness, and the stubborn dream that had become their life. The bells rang through the night, and the laughter of the city rolled out across the water, carrying their promise far beyond the walls. It would not last forever. No peace ever did. But in that golden age, measured not by the lives of kings, but by the kindness of neighbors, the learning of children, the care of counsel and counselor. King's Landing stood unafraid, its story a beacon on the edge of the world, bright enough to be remembered. Meiji. Autumn's first storm swept in from the narrow sea, battering the coast with cold rain and wind that sent the city's banners streaming and rattled every window of the Red Keep. In the candlelit warmth of the council chamber, the Round Table gathered its members for another long session, the patter of rain outside a steady counterpoint to debate within. The room was alive with energy, the bright voices of new apprentices, the low rumble of Gendry and Davos planning repairs to the city's bridges, the silvery laughter of Margaery and Maya comparing this year's first apples. Sansa presided with quiet confidence, her words the thread that drew order from the lively chaos. They argued harvest quotas, fair pay for the new city guards, relief for the Vale after an early frost, and a half-dozen small disputes brought by the cobblers and carpenters' guilds. Sansa allowed each voice its turn, young and old, noble and common, and watched with pride as her counselors, once only the highborn and the bold, now included a broad-shouldered shipwright from Salt Pans and a weathered healer from Flea Bottom. What once would have been scandal was now simply life. Arya slipped in late, dripping rain, hair wild about her face, eyes shining with the freedom of the open road. She brought news from the Stormlands, tales of sea raiders turned traders, of a ruined holdfast rebuilt by its own folk with tools sent from the city's forges. Daenerys, who arrived moments later, her cloak heavy with river mist, added word from the villages south of the Roserad, where her dragons had been sighted hunting deer and wild goats. The small folk, she said, no longer fled at the sight of wings overhead, but greeted her with bread and honey, children running alongside as she rode the fields. The council's work, though never finished, bore fruit in ways big and small. The city's schools and orphanages thrived, the poorest lanes grew cleaner, their lanterns burning bright. Apprenticeships flourished, and guilds vied for cleverness in crafts and generosity in feasts. The Lily Guard patrolled in green and silver, more symbol than enforcer, their presence enough to settle most quarrels before they began. Sansa sometimes wondered if the city's contentment made it soft, or if it was merely the new shape of strength. It was true, the city's festivals had grown grander, and the council's popularity could not be doubted. Yet, beneath the laughter, old wounds still whispered. Jon, when he visited, saw it too. The way the lords of the Vale eyed the council's seats, the subtle slights traded between old families and new. But each time tension rose, it was met by compromise, an argument at the table, not a duel in the street. On a day when the rain finally broke, Sansa and Margaery strolled the Queen's gardens, the grass silver with dew. They spoke of new seeds in the coming winter, of children born to families who had once been enemies. "Do you ever worry it will slip away?" Margaery asked, voice gentle. "Every morning," Sansa answered, "and every night. But each day we build a little more, and with each harvest, the roots grow deeper." Margaery smiled. "It's easier to tend a garden than a city. But both can surprise you, if you're patient." They wandered among the roses, and Sansa found herself thinking of her mother, of Winterfell, of all she had lost and all she had gained. The city was not perfect. Sometimes it was loud, sometimes weary, sometimes afraid. But it was hers, and she would not let it go easily. Down in the bustling lanes of the city, Gendry and Maya Stone worked alongside the guildsmen, planning a new aqueduct that would carry clean water to the lowest quarters. Maya, quick with numbers and names, juggled supply lists and schedules. Gendry tested pipes in the foundry, teaching the youngest apprentices the difference between iron and steel, the way to listen for the song of true metal. A storm delayed their work, flooding the new trenches and sending mud into every shop. For 3 days, Gendry's smiths and Maya's orphans worked by lantern light, bailing water, mending planks, stacking sandbags. When the sun returned, the aqueduct stood firm. The council declared a day of rest and celebration, and Gendry cooked for the city, his laughter ringing over the tables in the common squares. Maya organized a race for the children, with Arya as the starter and Daenerys handing out sweet cakes at the finish. Daenerys was more beloved than ever, though she never sought titles or favor. Each morning, she met with the city's healers, sharing southern herbs and stories of distant lands, then walked the riverbanks to check on the watermen and bakers. When quarrels rose in the market, her presence calmed them, her steady voice, her kindness, her memory for names and faces. The dragons grew, their flight broader each year, but never threatening. They hunted far, leaving the city in peace, and became, in their way, symbols of wildness, safely kept. Brienne continued to train the Lily Guard, her eye for honesty more valuable than swordplay. Podrick's gentle patience with new recruits drew even the most doubtful to try. The festival competitions became the pride of every child, and the city's young women won as often as the men, Brienne's quiet smile the only praise needed. Tyrion returned from Essos with a delegation from Braavos and Tyrosh. The city's treasury, well managed, brimmed with gold. But Tyrion's shrewd advice was still needed. He helped negotiate new trade routes, and kept a watchful eye for any hint of old debts returning. Jon's return was always cause for celebration. He arrived before the first nose, cloaked in wolfskin, Ghost at his side. The city's children flocked to him, some shy, some bold, all eager to hear stories of the wild. Jon brought news from the north, new towns rising, the wildlings thriving. Bran's latest letters full of strange visions and warnings. Sansa welcomed him with a quiet meal. Arya challenged him to a spar at dawn. Daenerys walked with him by the river, silent but companionable. The council grew with every year, now boasting seats for maesters, for sailors, even for a septon chosen by the small folk. Each week, Sansa began the session with the words, "The realm is not the table. It is all who gather at it." With every decision, the city's fabric tightened. Yet even in peace, challenges arrived. That autumn, an old noble, Lord Westerling, sought to stir the city's lords against the council, claiming they'd weakened tradition and let the realm slip from noble hands. He gathered supporters in secret, whispering of lost glories and the need for a strong king. Sansa faced him in council, allowing him to speak. Margaery countered with the city's growth and peace. Gendry, his arms folded, told how work and bread had built unity where blood could not. Arya, standing in the back, fixed Lord Westerling with a gaze that cowed even his bravest men. When the council voted, Westerling's petition failed. By the voices of the small folk, the guilds, the healers, the maesters, the Lily Guard. Even some nobles, recalling the city's bad old days, voted for the council. Westerling departed quietly, and soon after, his own sons came to the council, seeking places for their daughters and trade for their house. As the nights grew longer, the city prepared for winter with firewood stacked and cellars filled. Lanterns hung in every street, and Sansa ordered a new statue for the market, of a child and a dragon, hand in hand. The round table glowed each night with laughter, debate, and the steady certainty of many hands shaping the future together. On the last day before snow, Arya and Gendry walked the city's walls. "It will change again," Arya said softly. "It always does." Gendry nodded. "Then we build it again and again, as long as it takes." Below, the city hummed, alive, awake, forging the next day. And above it all, banners snapped in the wind, the dragons soared in the last light, and the city, for that season, was truly free.